Welcome to Athens City Council. This evening, we will be meeting in council committees. The meeting will be called to order by the City Council President, who will then pass discussion over to a respective committee. The chair of the committee will introduce the discussion topics and provide an overview of the issues at hand. If needed, members of the administration will offer brief statements to provide further context. We will then welcome input from the community. Any citizens who wish to speak will be asked to state their name and address, both verbally and on the sign-in sheet located at the podium. Individuals will be given one opportunity to share their thoughts, and the committee chair will have the authority to limit each speaker to 3 minutes. Once all citizens have had the opportunity to speak within the 15-minute time period allotted for total public participation on each topic, the public comment portion will be closed. Council committee members will then continue their deliberations. There may be additional questions directed to the administration during this time. When the discussion on the topic concludes, the chair will indicate whether legislation will be introduced at the next regular session of council and move on to the next item on the agenda or adjourn the committee if their work is complete. The next committee chair will then call their committee to order, proceeding in the same manner as before. Once all committees have adjourned, City Council will conclude for the evening.
Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, December 9th, 2024 at 7:02 p.m. and we have a series of committee meetings tonight and then a special regular session of council. I have two slight amendments for our committee meeting agenda this evening. Under Committee of the Whole, I would like to add an appropriations agenda item to the Committee of the Whole, and also a slight administrative note that the third item on our Committee of the Whole is listed as the Community Relations Commission proposed legislation. This actually is the Disabilities Commission proposed legislation. The first item under Committee of the Whole is the Pedestrian Accessibility and Bicycle Task Force 2024 report. I'd like to invite Stephanie and others forward. Thank you.
I'm Stephanie Hunter. I'm a member of the Pedestrian Accessibility and Bicycle Task Force. We don't really have a hierarchy, but I lead the meetings. I am one of the resident members of the task force. I'm one of the founding members, and I worked on the 2023 Pedestrian Accessibility Report. If you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to just speak up and we will answer them along the way. Our mission statement is that we are promoting walking and biking as part of the transportation system and providing leadership and expertise to City Council and city staff. We were created in 2023 by a resolution of Athens City Council and had our first meeting in October of 2023. And we have developed bylaws. We have 9 members with 4 representatives and 5 residents. So we have students, the mayor's designee, the Disability Commission representative, and a City Council representative. We have 5 guiding documents: the Athens 2040 Comprehensive Plan, the Athens Non-Motorized Transportation Plan, the Athens Uptown Active Transportation Plan, the Athens Complete Streets Policy, and the Athens Pedestrian Accessibility Plan. So here is the 2024 State of the City. We have had some good stuff. We've had gains in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So we have the new shared use path on West Union Street and the sidewalk on Darien Lane. And we also have the pedestrian safety quick fill project on East State Street and Watt Street by Village Bakery. That's the pedestrian bump out right there, which anecdotally seems to be slowing traffic and making it much easier to cross. We'll follow up on that in 2025. We maintained our position as the 4th most bikeable city in Ohio. So we've had some slow and steady improvement. We have actually slipped down from 1st place because other cities are doing some cool stuff. So let's keep working on that. We have continued implementation of the 2010 non-motorized transport plan. So that includes Two recommendations implemented this year. So we are at 49% of the recommendations have been implemented, which is pretty good. Those were the Union South Side sidewalk and the shared use path on the same street. There were three recommendations that we brought to attention but were ignored. The mid-block crossings on Union, a marked crossing at Jefferson Street, again on Union, and the third one is installing a bike lane on South Congress, which prioritized, which the repaving prioritized turn lanes over bike lanes. But the task force recommends an update of the plan as it's been basically 50% completed. Some items no longer really make sense, and it's almost 15 years old. We've been gathering baselines as well, which we will share with you today, and which we'll be using in the years to come to measure progress. And so with that, on to my colleague, George.
Hello, everybody. My name is George. I'm the student representative on the committee, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the projects we've been working on. Our first project, we inventoried bicycle parking around key amenities in the city, such as medical campuses, the university, the city's administrative buildings, and overall, we found a relative lack of bike parking. The existing bike parking was relatively low quality, and overall, there's a relative low amount of right-of-way for cyclists in the city. Biking is obviously very important for the sustainability of a community, the involvement of a community, and the equity of a community. And bike parking is essential for promoting biking, as the fear of theft keeps many bikers from accessing the city the way they intend. The one piece we've been working on is exploring the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, who have a 12-page guide on bike parking. And we have been working with the city planner and code enforcement office to get that codified and set as a guideline for business owners and properties around the city. We would also like to make the recommendation that through city channels, this 12-page guide be pushed out and made available to business owners. Next, another large seasonal issue in Athens is snow and ice removal, which is a problem on both private and public infrastructure. One issue we see around town is the city snowplows will all too often dump snow on crosswalks, creating large barriers to accessibility. In the 2023 plan, we made the recommendation that there be formalized training for the snowplow drivers, but we received no definitive answer on if that was already being implemented or if that could be to come. And the next key side of this is the sidewalks on private property, which are the responsibility of the property owners, but still public right-of-way in many cases. And all too often, property owners, renters are not clearing their sidewalks within the recommended time, which is 4 hours within snowfall. Last year, we drafted a public service announcement, and the script was repurposed into another video, which was pushed out on city channels. We didn't get much snow last year, but it's looking like that might be another large issue this year. So we would like that video to be repushed out through city channels, and perhaps even through the university's channels, since renters, student renters, are a large part of this problem. Next, we have the bicycle network analysis. We simply updated the metrics, which for the People for Bikes traffic stress analysis, which gauges safety and accessibility for bikers around campus. Next, our task force also worked on bus stop audits. Our task force devised the SPACE metric, which ranked bus stops based on safety, proximity, accessibility, connection, and ease of use. With HAPCAP and the Community Mobility Coordinator, we surveyed 77 of the 106 bus stops, which our task force then mapped And on the document that was provided in Appendix A, you can find the map and more information. Similarly, all of these projects, more detailed information can be found on our report. Next, a project I've been working on is looking into a memorandum of understanding with Ohio University. This started when I was looking into the 2014 Memorandum of Understanding, which allocated $50,000 a year of the university's money to be put towards accessible planning. And I know funding is a large reason that is commonly cited for not being able to make all of the ADA transition recommendations that we would like to see. And so I'm hoping that this can open a new avenue for funding and get the ball rolling on some of those projects. I met with Michael Hicks, Michael Hicks from the school's accessibility office, and I have worked out with him that a new memorandum of understanding is indeed in the interest of their office and is being pushed up on their agenda. So I will be in close contact with the committee, with the school, and with you all on the progress of that. A next project, which Stephanie briefly mentioned, is the curb bump out on East State Street. And once again, anecdotally, we have been seeing a reduction in traffic speed around that area. But it was constructed with temporary, blanking on the term for them, but temporary pillars, essentially. And so we would like to try a pilot project for street art that would see a mural installed on this cutout space, not only to beautify the area, but to permanently solidify this bump out as an installation for that crosswalk. A calculated budget for this project was around $252. So after holding a design contest for artists around Athens, we would like to apply for a community micro grant and see that this spot is beautified. And one thing I would like to ask the council, I'm attempting to get a image of this bump out from a 90-degree angle above through our school's remote sensing department. And my professor informed me that I would need express permission from the city and the property owners. The image would only have the bump out, maybe part of the city's right of way on the grass, unlikely even the sidewalk, but I'm still gonna reach out to the property owners. But I would like to ask of you guys for express permission to fly a university drone no more than 10, 15 feet high, just to get a scalable image that I can send to artists for the design contest. Another project we've been working on is looking into administrative fines for poor sidewalk conditions and infractions on the city's code for sidewalk violations. Essentially, the current process sees that a report is made, it goes to a legal clerk, a citation is drafted and sent to the property owners. But seeing as in the 2019 Engineering and Public Works Survey, about a quarter of the city sidewalks were deemed inaccessible, and that is still very much the case. And so this system does not seem to currently be working. We wanted to see if this could be moved to a more enforceable branch. We reached out to the police department. They did not seem interested in taking on this additional responsibility. Code enforcement seems to be on board with the idea. So this is something we will be working on, but is currently on hold for now. That's more punitive side of sidewalk enforcement, and that's why I started putting more time into the memorandum of understanding, looking at getting funding and more of a reward-based approach to solving this problem. Finally, our committee has been collecting and updating the metrics on the city's improvement of bike and cycling infrastructure, as well as mapping this data. And so Rob is going to give a further exploration of this project. Thank you.
Thanks, George. So, so we developed metrics, and task force developed a series of metrics to help track progress on making the city more walkable, bikeable, and accessible. Creating and updating metrics for tracking progress is crucial because they provide a structured way to evaluate success, identify areas for improvement, and maintain focus. Well-defined metrics help quantify progress and ensure they are tangible and measurable. According to the adage, what gets measured gets done. So we created 25 categories of metrics, and that's a little over the top, I think. But we have a number of those are baseline metrics, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference here. But we have 10 key metrics that we pulled out of those 25 categories that we thought were important ones to keep an eye on. And so I'll go over those right now. So the first slide here, we have 3, and notice on the left, I have green arrows, meaning this is good progress, right? So we have a lot of great progress this year. Over 17,000 feet of updated pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. That's repaving basically, or improvements like that. That includes the repaving of the bikeway on the 2 sections this year. It was over 11,000 feet, but still over 6,000 feet of sidewalk were replaced this year, which is a 3% replacement. So if you do 3% a year, you've replaced all the sidewalk in 33 1/3 years. So the target for that should be about 25, but that's probably the best the city has done since at least I've been here in 1 year. So it's a really good progress. New bike lanes and paths, 4/10 of a mile, and then new pedestrian infrastructure, almost 3/4 of a mile there. So we've added then, the city has added 1.1 miles of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on its streets, which is a 2.8% increase this year. Went from 39.3 miles to 40.4 miles of bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. So big improvements. This slide, the top metric here is one we looked at of, you're probably aware that there are steps built into sidewalks around the city. And I don't mean like the steps that go up behind the armory. That's pedestrian only access and can't really make those accessible, right? Without a lift, I guess, right? But these are steps that are built into the sidewalks that make the sidewalk completely inaccessible. And so by our count, there were 15 of these previous to this year. 2 have now been bypassed on West Union with the new sidewalk and shared use path that's gone in near the road. I think those stairs are still there, but you don't have to use them anymore. You can just stay right on the path near the road. So that's a big improvement right there. Street trees planted. There were a couple at bus stops by the Arbor Day Commission, and also the Kinnear Flats on East State Street. That project, they installed seven trees, I believe it was there. The last metric on this page is benches installed along pedestrian corridors, and that includes parks. So they're sort of all over the place here. I think the right number is 5. This is sort of hard to get at. One of those is at the hospital on the bike path section that the city maintains. There's one in West State Park. There's one in near Community Park, Community Center. And then there's 2, I believe, at the fire station that have been installed this year as part of that project. So some progress on that front. The 7th metric is, this is one Stephanie mentioned earlier, the 2010 non-motorized transportation plan, or commonly called the Bike Ped Master Plan. Over almost half of that's been implemented by the city now, so good progress, and a couple more items were implemented this year as well with the West State Street project. So good progress there as well. The last slide I have here for metrics, I've got 3 things and I've got question marks because these are baseline calculations. We don't really have any historic data to compare these to. We don't know how many intersections and crossings exactly there were, or how many curb cuts had tactile grids until we did this inventory. And also even bus stops. Stephanie mentioned this as well. We worked with, or George maybe was mentioned it, worked with the county mobility coordinator to do an inventory of the bus stops. It was sort of an initial effort. hope to do a more detailed effort this coming year. And so we have some baseline data for that as well we can look at in the future of how accessible our bus stops are. So hopefully in the future we can look at these and some of those other metrics and see what our progress is like. One more thing just to mention is this isn't one of the metrics, but it makes sense to pay attention to crashes. What's going on as far as people being hit by cars. Primarily, these are car, bicycle, pedestrian crashes. And we have data now compiled for the last 5 years. That's both from ODOT and then from the city. Does not include university crashes except for a couple. They report those to a different platform altogether, and I haven't yet got my hands on those. But as you can see, before the pandemic, fairly high numbers, dropped during the pandemic and has been inching back up since. That's the same national trend we're seeing. So our little microcosm here, it's not much different in that respect. Fortunately, though, we've had no fatalities in the last 5 years, so that's really good news. And we'll continue to look at this. This data is through 2023. 2024 isn't quite complete yet, and that reporting doesn't happen all the way through till April. All right, so we didn't hear any questions. Maybe we didn't see anybody, but if anybody has questions, willing to try and field those. I want to point out these pictures, which now you can't see them, you see me. The pictures that went up on the slide are real sidewalks here in Athens, Mound Street in particular. So.
Just letting you know that's still on the screen below us.
Oh, is it? Oh, you can see it. Okay, good. Any questions? Or can I call on people? Do you do that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Member Swank.
Couple of questions. Go back to George's presentation on parking and snow. Yeah, you're right. We haven't had snow in a while. My granddaughters cried one snow day last year. This year we'll have snow. Many of the places that I've visited over the last 40 years, when it comes to snow, have snow parking bans, where if snow exceeds X number of inches, you cannot park on the street. You highlighted the fact that plowing can be a bit of an issue. Have you looked into that at all, particularly on the east side? Get over on Maplewood, Sunnyside, Elmwood, cars parked on both sides. It's very difficult for a plow to do anything. Have you looked into possibly snow, what they call snow emergencies, where snow exceeds 2 or 3 inches, you can't park on the street?
That's really more about clearing the street itself, and we're focused on the sidewalks and trying to make sure that crosswalks and intersections are clear for people to navigate them on foot or with wheels. And I think it's outside the scope of what we'd probably pay attention to. I don't know, honestly, if our city is having trouble clearing the streets in situations where there's still cars on the street. The one problem in Athens is there's not much of any place to move those cars in many cases. Mm-hmm. We don't have, a lot of streets don't have driveways. So I'm not sure how feasible that is either. So.
Okay, second question has to deal with, I think it was your last slide, and that is accidents, particularly car, pedestrian, car, bicycle. Did you look at the Richland Avenue roundabout and what may be the most dangerous crosswalk in Athens?
No, there's been no crashes there. Not pedestrian bicycle crashes. There are some car crashes in that roundabout, but still they're mostly minor crashes. I've looked at that briefly, just sort of to look at the numbers. And there are some car crashes, but there have been no crashes involving pedestrians or bicyclists at the roundabout, I believe, since it was constructed.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about, the crosswalk. Instead of going through the tunnel.
Yes, which is a legal crosswalk. It was designed for that purpose.
Yeah, it's a nightmare waiting to happen.
Designed by ODOT and the city and constructed for exactly that purpose. It's functioning. And some people have tried to complain about this on City Source, and I've seen the responses from the city. It's designed and operating as expected.
It's a fallacy in design, so it is what it is.
What they intended.
Yeah.
So.
Member Spelnis?
Well, I just want to say that you did a really nice job this year, and I'm really proud of all of you. Having been on the task force that started this whole thing and seeing how well you guys work, I'm really pleased at how much you've done. And I think it's going to really help make decisions for the future and what we need to do. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Yes, Members Clodfelter.
Yeah, just to briefly echo what Member Speldny said, George, I think if you could make a video about how to be a student representative, that would be great, because you're the best student representative I've seen. But I was also wondering, just a quick question for the three of you. This was so well organized and well conveyed, and you've clearly been doing really excellent work. How do you get your data on crash?
Actual numbers of crashes. Actual numbers of crashes. So I'm still working with those private property crashes because that's of interest, I think, for our purposes. So I include those in this, but ODOT does not because they're not on streets per se. The university, I think in these numbers you see on the screen here, only 2 of these were reported by OU. And that was just in 2022 or 2021, they reported 2 crashes. There's way more than that. I think there were 21 or something last year. They didn't report any of those through to ODOT. They report them to the Highway Patrol. So it's a whole different database, and I'm trying to figure out how to get my hands on that data so I can sort of add it to the repertoire here. But working on that.
Thank you.
Member DeLatch, do you know, is that OUPD that reports it to the Highway Patrol?
Yes, it is OUPD.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our second report of the evening from the Affordable Housing Commission.
Question over there.
Yes, Mayor? Sorry.
Just a friendly comment to one of the things that was just brought up, and that is taking some drone photos. I know that our illustrious government channel has the ability to operate drones, and I'm sure if you work with Scott or Ryan, that they can hopefully go out on site and get that for you rather quickly, so that you can, I'll give you permission, you know, but it's the government channel that has the license. That's fine.
Okay, I guess that was permission to start. So I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Commission and the liaison from City Council. So I'm here to talk about what we've done this last year. I'm also going to have Shay Myers, who's an architect in the community, and he's on the Affordable Housing Commission, and he's going to highlight some of the areas that he knows more about than anybody else. Thank you. All right, so today's goals, I want to present the mission, history, and our accomplishments, and discuss the 4 committee's goals just a little bit, and report on our progress. I want to be really clear that there's a lot to talk about, but given the long agenda, I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. You can all cheer now. But I do want to explain to people what the Affordable Housing Commission is and what it is not. And I think this is a good time to talk about that. So our mission really is to it was established to investigate community affordable housing models, identify needs and opportunities within Athens city limits to advance decent, safe, sustainable, affordable housing for all city residents. The Commission is tasked with providing advice and guidance on measures and policies that influence access and needs within the local housing market. And we have what that really means, a definition through HUD that we won't go into today. But I want to emphasize that the Affordable Housing Commission, it does not define by low-income housing. Yes, that's an important piece that we want to make sure that we include. We want to make sure that we include housing for all levels because it's important that we have executive housing as well as housing for seniors, housing for workers, et cetera. We also want to make sure that we have housing that's appropriate for people with disabilities and for seniors. So we're not just working on low-income housing, though that's part of our charge. Okay, our purpose. And this is broader than I think people would imagine, but I also want to emphasize that we cannot make final decisions about anything. We are an advisory committee. We are a resource for the community and for the city. So we're responsible for anything related to housing issues, including but not limited to zoning and implementation, fire, police, and safety services, recreational services, housing code and enforcement services, Athens City transit, streets, and parking services, utilities, water, sewer, et cetera, existing programs and needs. For example, one of the things that we want to make sure of is, are there enough sidewalks considered and transit considered when we're looking at new housing proposals. So that needs to be that's part of what we look at. Okay, we look at being a liaison between members of the community and the local government. We respond to questions from public, local government, and the community, consult with city officials, councils, citizens, and institutions of Athens, and inform the city of grant opportunities and prepare an annual report, which I'm doing today. So I want to just go back a little bit of history. So in 2016, there was a task force that was set up to look at affordable housing as an issue. And from that report, which I'll go into in a minute, in 2017, an ordinance was passed to establish the Affordable Housing Commission. Now, because of COVID and some other related factors, the commission was essentially non-functioning for a few years, but I was determined that I wanted this to be back on in action. So in January 2024, when I had the opportunity to be a liaison and work on the commission, I took that opportunity. So just a couple things from the original report. These were findings that the report included, and I'll go over them very briefly. Partner with community organizations to promote more mid-level priced housing. The city and university should seek comprehensive approaches to neighborhood housing conversion, revitalization, and reconstruction. And they mentioned the idea of establishing a 501c3 to manage the development of new housing stock and neighborhood housing conversion. We have, with the new community authority, I think that in a sense is kind of meeting, in a way, that goal. Okay, the city and university and other Athens employers might want to consider providing financial incentives for individuals who choose to live in targeted neighborhoods for housing conversion, et cetera. And Athens City Council, Ohio University Affordable Housing Task Force looked at several financial models that might be used to improve their recommendations. Okay, member composition. We have a stellar group of people that I'm very proud of working on this commission. We are required to have 11 voting members, 7 appointed by City Council, 1 mayor representative, 1 OU representative, a City Council representative, and the executive director of the Metropolitan Housing Authority. So here are members. You can look over it briefly. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to read it off, but you can see that we have people from various segments that represent various groups and neighborhoods. And I think that's really important to make good decisions. People have been around a long time. People are rather new, and also people who have various interests in housing. So the things that we've been working on, really, much of it was we found out that there were some bylaws issues that we had to make legal. We had to update the website. It was not functional, so we've tried to make it more accessible and available, and we want to turn it into a big repository of information for people interested in any kind of housing issue and link to resources that people might be interested in. We've also had to establish committees and set goals. We had to fill and establish leadership because there wasn't any. We have been working to collaborate with departments, organizations, and agencies to work on projects and goals. So I'll get into that in a minute. So these are the 4 committees. I wasn't going to show you all the goals because it's too long and it would take too much time. We have an executive committee, as you can imagine, pretty much everybody does. Then communications, we'd like to do better at communicating about housing issues with the community and anyone else who's interested, all the stakeholders. We have a new development committee, which of course means we try to get more housing of any kind, and then the neighborhood revitalization piece. And I've reached out and am working with David Riggs, our code enforcement director, and other people interested in these areas to try to see if we can come up with some ways to make it easier and better for their workers, their staff, and improve our communities. We've come up with some pretty good ideas, I think. Okay, projects. This is the part where Shay is going to take over for a little bit because he knows this better than I do. So take it over.
So one of the major, or a big project this year that the Affordable Housing Commission didn't really work on, but kind of Megan Jennings with the city planner. That is a lot of work on updating our zoning codes. A major issue with our zoning codes and what they allowed in terms of new construction within the city limits, as well as people looking to modify their own homes or buildings in the city, and this applies to both commercial and residential properties, was not in line with either the kind of historical character of the neighborhood as well as our modern needs. So these bulk control changes essentially revised the maximum and minimum dimensions that you can kind of work with in any individual parcel of land. Some of the specific problems that we were seeing was that these, like I mentioned, essentially if you were to tear down an old home in the neighborhood, you very likely could not actually rebuild it as is due to the yard setbacks and due to the some of the other lot coverage requirements. You also could not improve a lot of existing homes, whether you wanted to add a front porch or a deck or add on to your home without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for variance. And so these bulk control changes, I think, will alleviate a lot of cases that have been going to the Board of Zoning Appeals to ask for something that is already in line with the character of their neighborhood. And as this relates to affordable housing, these bulk control changes also will create some new opportunities for housing to be created in Athens city limits. The items that were changed were a reduction in the minimum lot sizes, so the minimum lot area that you need to build something, minimum lot frontages, the width of these lots, reduction in the setbacks, the yard areas, so front yard, side yard, and rear yard setbacks, allowable increases in building heights, increases in lot coverages, and as well as a front yard provision that kind of allows some flexibility in people who may want to, build an addition or build a home closer to the street front, like a lot of Athens, and it allows for some averaging to happen, essentially to kind of match what your neighboring lots are already doing. So it takes into account not just what's written into the code. Instead of having a blanket front yard setback, there's a kind of an averaging provision that's a little bit more specific to specific neighborhoods. And the last point, some lots in the city that were larger lots that previously could only legally hold one unit of housing can now, depending on the size, potentially fit 2 or 3 units of housing, which will allow for some gentle, kind of moderate infill density throughout the city, likely over time. There were 2 parts to these updates. There was the residential component as well as the commercial component. The residential updates ultimately will allow for more conformity, consistency with what has historically been built in Athens. I don't know about most, a lot of lots in the city would have been considered non-compliant with the old zoning codes, meaning they essentially, if they were to be built today, they would not be legal with these zoning codes. These bulk control updates mean that a lot more of our existing lots are basically brought into compliance, meaning they can be rebuilt more or less as they are without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for variances. This has an impact on affordability. When you have more flexibility to build more densely and to build more flexibly on a property, that does help with affordability and accessibility to housing. And it also provides more flexibility to people who already own homes in the city to be able to modify those homes in ways that make sense with their neighborhood without that additional burden of going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then on the commercial side of things, there were also a set of commercial updates that were passed along with the residential updates that we're essentially doing the same thing, kind of bringing those commercial bulk controls into alignment or more closely into alignment with our modern needs and our actual, the reality of what is actually built in our neighborhoods, which can have impacts on, the kind of viability of our businesses, our local small businesses, as well as improve walkability, sustainability, allow us to build more flexibly in commercial districts.
Okay, so clearly I wasn't involved in, and the commission wasn't involved in creating the Ridges development, but we did have a part in it, and we are continuing to have a little bit of a part in it. I worked on, and some of us worked on, a focus group series for senior housing as part of this. And I just wanted to emphasize that this is a big piece of what could be happening very soon in Athens, potentially 700 housing units of a variety of different kinds. We don't know exactly what that's going to be, but renters, single-family homes, townhouses, condos, the whole thing. They want to make that available to various income levels, et cetera. So right now, the last I heard, as of a week or so ago, is that the OU is processing the plan through the Ohio Department of Administration Services and Controlling Board. I believe they should have all the documents they need at this point, and they anticipate a spring approval to transfer the land to the Ridges New Community Authority. And the first RFP is going to be for senior housing, and that's going to be pretty exciting. Yes.
For this Ridges development, which sounds like it's going to be the biggest housing development we've seen here in years, that's 700 is a lot. Is that going to renovate existing buildings at the Ridges, or
Yes.
will this be new construction?
It's going to be both.
Okay.
So they're first going to go for the new construction. It's just easier to do, and they're going to fund this basically by selling what they build first and then moving it along. So along Dairy Lane, there's going to be some condos, or if that's the plan anyway, and then behind the dairy barn. Plus, there's going to be a supportive services residential facility there, which is much needed in the community and very much desired. So that whole area, and again, the trails will be left intact. All our beautiful hiking trails, which I use often, are going to be left alone, and we're not going to mess with them. Obviously, the university is going to keep some of the property for their own use, for teaching and research and artist lofts, according to what they're hoping for. And once they've done that, the buildings, but actually one of the outbuildings, one of the bigger outbuildings that's now completely closed, that could very well come early in the process. But the historic part will probably come later. And they've been talking about 7 to 10 years to complete it. But if all goes well, they should be starting to build it towards the end of next year. That might be optimistic, but that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
So I want to continue to be part of learning about it and having some input on the design. And the commission, of course, wants to make sure it happens. Okay, I want to emphasize that this was not also anything that we started, but Project Co-Create was the brainchild of Carrie Pigman, who is the executive director of the Athens County Foundation. And what they're doing is trying to create emergency housing for those people who are in dire need and don't have a place to stay tonight, basically, and trying to find a variety of different strategies to do that. And I've been quite involved with this process, and I'm leading an effort to try to get the churches involved and see what they can do to help with this process. So, but the good news is that one small piece of this is that HAPCAP has purchased, gotten a $2 million grant to purchase and rehab the Sunset Motel. Everybody knows where the Sunset Motel is. And they're in the process of trying to seek input from the community through a survey. I believe all of you have gotten a copy of that, and I'd be happy to make that available again. And this is part of a whole comprehensive set of plans. I'll try to wrap it up. Okay, there's the Welcome Home grant, which I don't want to get into too much because it's just kind of getting rolling, and I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. I've been talking to Megan and other folks involved with this about how this is going to work, so we'll see. But it's a kind of a long story. But anyway, $2 million to construct 8 affordable housing units. And this would be owner occupied for the minimum of 20 years. And there would be 4 people with relatively low to moderate income. And they would be able to keep it and be able to have a very low mortgage on it because of how it's worked out. Long story. Anyway, okay. And that's it. So There's a lot that's in the works, but it's too early to talk about it. We're working on some ordinances that we think will improve our housing situation in a variety of ways. We'll get into that. We'll keep you posted as those evolve. But the bulk of this year has really been just getting the infrastructure and recruiting people who fit the guidelines of what is required in the ordinance. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Spelnis. Any comments or questions?
Okay.
I'll just note that the Welcome Home Ohio initiative, one of the things I really like about it is the proposed revolving,
Yes.
that the money that was taken in will be used to do more excellent work.
Right. Well, much to be done.
Thank you.
Big problem.
Any comments from the city administration, public on this presentation? Brittany, please come and state your name and your address and whether you represent a group.
Hi, I'm Brittany Anderson. I represent my home self, but 19 East Carpenter Street. So how she said about the Sunset Motel thing, is that going to be for like homeless people too, or just like everybody, or just in general? I know some people stay there, that's why I'm asking, and other things.
It's for emergency housing for people that don't have no place to go. I mean,
So,
we
like,
do have
homeless?
Good Works in the Timothy House, but they have minimal capacity and they can't do emergency housing. You have to get screened. They don't have an opportunity if it's, 8 o'clock at night and you have no place to go,
Right.
So it's one possibility and a lot of different options for people as we try to work this out.
So no, any of this for no homeless people? I mean, I know some that are homeless and they're like trying to survive, and I
Right.
mean,
This is exactly what it's for, is for people who are unhoused.
that needs
Exactly.
to happen. I've seen some people I've known, and
Yep. And that's what we're trying to work on exactly. And
That's
there's
good.
40-some organizations and 90-some people all coordinating on a variety of different solutions. So hopefully we will really make some progress on this issue.
I like how he mentioned the bike thing, like the pass and the snow and things. It needs, some streets ain't plowed and it's not accessible for some things, and seeing wrecks and other things that ain't appropriate and great. So just the other day I heard a drunk person got in front of a car and got, hit. So it's been great. All right, thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Any other members of the public? Okay, moving on to the last item under Committee of the Whole, the Disabilities Commission proposed legislation, and this will be presented by Member McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. I serve as Council's liaison to our Commission on Disabilities and appreciate the hard work that they've been putting into advocating for accessibility and ADA compliance for years. Appreciate the progress that our administration has also been able to make on increasing some ADA initiatives. And the Commission has shared a couple of drafts of legislation that they would like Council to consider, and those have been shared with Council ahead of time. I, as the liaison, am bringing them to Council's attention unedited so that you can hear directly the requests and perspectives and research that has come from our Commission on Disabilities members, starting with an ordinance establishing the Accessible Business Collaborative Grant. And this draft language proposed by the Commission on Disabilities indicates that whereas the City of Athens believes that all citizens, regardless of disability, will have access to all areas of community life, and whereas the City of Athens is required to come into compliance with federal law as stated by the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, and whereas the City of Athens has made significant improvements to accessibility by seeking grants and other funding to complete accessibility projects, and whereas the City of Athens created the Athens City Commission on Disabilities in 2004, sustained through member appointments from the Mayor's office and the City Council to support the needs of people with disabilities in our community, and whereas the City of Athens wants to support businesses and building owners to come into compliance promptly, opening the door for people with all types of disabilities, and whereas over 30% of existing businesses in the City of Athens do not have accessible entrances, and whereas the City of Athens is a historic city, which, due to construction happening before 1990, leaves many entities needing accessibility correction, and whereas many buildings, businesses, and public spaces do not currently have the funding to complete necessary improvements, And whereas the success from the first year of a matching grant program elevated the accessibility of 5 businesses in Athens, increasing their potential revenue and economic participation, be it ordained by the City Council of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, Athens City Council hereby is directing the city administration to create the Cooperative Business Accessibility Program, including funding to provide matching grants to Athens businesses and building owners that allow accessibility improvements. Grant recipients shall be selected by members of the Athens City Commission on Disabilities and the City Administration. Section 2, the Athens City Auditor is hereby directed to create an account for the Cooperative Business Accessibility Program for $30,000 annually or an equivalent amount of money in the future, adjusted for inflation, which shall be used to fund the matching grant for local businesses and building owners to become more accessible. That is the language drafted by Commission on Disabilities, particularly for a grant program that is proposed to help support accessibility projects for local businesses. The second ordinance, as it is proposed in its draft form, is an ordinance to develop and adopt an ADA transition plan, which incorporates a 10-year pedestrian infrastructure plan. Whereas according to the 2010 US Census, 19% of the population live with a disability, and whereas the City of Athens is dedicated to having a transition plan to come into compliance with the federally mandated Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and whereas the City of Athens prepared and the Athens City Council adopted a non-motorized transportation plan in 2010 that recommends both an ADA transition plan and complete streets policy and includes citations of published design guidelines and reports. And whereas the City of Athens developed the Uptown Athens Active Transportation Plan in 2018, and whereas the City of Athens included accessibility in its Athens 2040 Comprehensive Plan prepared in 2020, recognizing that sidewalks and their ADA compliance should be a top priority for city government, and recommending a complete streets policy. And whereas the City of Athens has a complete streets policy in effect as of 2020, and whereas the Ad hoc Pedestrian Accessibility Committee of the City of Athens City Council prepared a pedestrian accessibility plan in 2023 and established a pedestrian accessibility and bicycle task force as recommended by that plan. And whereas the county developed an active transportation plan for the county in 2024, naming Athens city officials the responsible party for sidewalk repair and maintenance, and urging those officials and project planners to consider accessibility in all new construction and rehabilitation projects. And whereas all existing plans and policies substantiate the need to focus on accessibility in the City of Athens, some recommending the development of the ADA transition plan outright, and all recommending the inclusion of the Athens City Commission on Disabilities for input and advice, acknowledging that including community members with lived experience in the planning process is the best way to achieve an outcome that is accessible for everyone. And whereas all existing plans and policies still await full implementation by the City of Athens, and whereas hundreds of municipalities have been sued due to non-compliance with ADA requirements for sidewalks alone, and while most newsworthy have been major cities, that number includes a wide range of places, including small cities around the size of Athens, like Pekin, Illinois, Fort Morgan, Colorado, West Columbia, South Carolina, and couple dozen more that are listed in this draft, all having spent more funds on the combination of litigation, fines, and construction than would have been spent on the construction alone, making the construction a clear cost savings. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Athens, Ohio. Section 1, by the end of 2025, the Athens City Administration will have in place an ADA transition plan which identifies barriers to access, plans for their remediation, establishes timelines for completion and continued management, and appropriates funds for both completion and management. This will include accessible pedestrian infrastructure and not limited to public buildings. Section 2, the Athens City Council is hereby directed to appropriate 20% of all funding for street infrastructure and capital projects to accessibility, inclusion, and remediation. That is the ordinance as it is drafted regarding the ADA transition plan, and again, that was an ordinance establishing the accessibility, an ordinance, that one titled an ordinance to develop and adopt an ADA transition plan, which incorporates a 10-year pedestrian infrastructure plan. That is the original draft language, and in my role as liaison from council to this commission, I would like to remind our council members that our new structure for these meetings is for a council member to kind of give a preliminary framing and then to invite administration to provide any insights and updates, as I know council has been updated by the mayor on a number of relevant efforts underway. And then we have an opportunity for members of the public who would like to comment on these proposed pieces of legislation to share so at the podium before members of the committee of the whole have an opportunity to engage in some discussion, which I would recommend include any specific questions or comments folks have. This is ultimately going to need to result in a decision of what needs to happen with these drafts, whether they get worked on some more or we eventually bring them to council for a first reading. And with that, I'll turn it over to our mayor for any comment from the administrative perspective.
Thank you, Councilmember McCary. Council, you've already seen the list that we've already pulled together that speaks to the number of projects, not only the number of projects, but the amount of money that the city has dedicated to ADA improvements in the city since 2015. And that amount is in excess of $15 million over that period of time, to include another $6 million that we have projected out to the year 2027. The idea of a 20% mandate for ADA improvements with street projects, I'll use the Stimson Avenue corridor as a prime example. It's a $7.2 million project, of which $1.4 million of that project was directly related to ADA improvements in that corridor. That's slightly more than 20% that we put into that, and that's just the way that we plan and implement improvements in the city with street projects. You know, we budget for about $500,000 annually for street repaving. So I am curious as to, with projects like that, which is when we repave streets that need some significant repair, $100,000 would then have to be set aside for ADA improvements. And I would be hard pressed to see, with a lot of the street planning, the repaving, where that $100,000 is going to go to. We typically will repair curb cuts or ADA ramps if we're doing repaving in various areas. But, you know, I would contend to City Council, again, if you look at the list that we pulled together for ADA improvements in the city, that we are doing very well when it comes to making ADA improvements when it comes to city-related projects. Not only with our street and sidewalk infrastructure, but also in our city parks. We were just awarded by the state the CDBG funding for the West Side sidewalk improvements. Just got the award earlier this week, or the tail end of last week, and that will be for another $150,000 with in excess of $200,000 match from the city that will go towards West Side improvements. And a lot of that will be ADA elements in that part of the city. So I just wanted to make sure that council and the viewing audience is clear that the city is not just sitting on our hands and not addressing ADA issues. That's a fallacy. That we are working diligently. The other thing I want to address would be the use of taxpayer dollars from the city's budget to grant funding to businesses. And really, at the end of the day, it's to the landlord that owns that building, unless the business outright owns their building, which is not common, in particular in the uptown area. We had revenue or funding last year that was dedicated to improvements, and therefore that grant that we had, which was a 50% match grant, we were able to use that for those improvements, for that grant. You know, it's not the best practice in the world for the city to be funding businesses and private property owners to make ADA improvements when it's their responsibility to make those improvements to those structures to where they are. They're an ADA violation. If they're open to the public, yet they are restrictive because someone who has a mobility issue is not able to use that facility. I would be open to looking at a change in that match mix if council is interested. But a 50% match, again, we're giving 50% to a business to sit there and make renovations that is their responsibility. I could see something more along the lines of a 80-20 match. 80% comes from the property owner or the business. 20% can come from this grant, not 50% and 50%. I mean, I'll give you a couple examples that I've been pondering over lately. And that would be, there's nothing that would preclude Ohio University from saying, we have a facility that we would like to renovate the bathroom to, and therefore we would like to apply for this funding to go towards an ADA improvement on university property. I could also see a business that operates out of the residence, which is not uncommon in the city of Athens, and that individual deciding, I need to renovate my bathroom. I'll make it ADA accessible and using that money. And so there's a level of potential abuse with a program like this as well, in my opinion. Again, I would contend that that it is incumbent upon the property owner as well as a business to make their business and make the facility ADA accessible for everybody. That's an ADA violation to not have accessibility in something that is allegedly open to the public. So those are my thoughts on this. I'm not adverse to anything in the work that the Commission on Disabilities is doing. I think they're doing stellar work, exemplary work. I just want to voice my thoughts on both of these potential pieces of legislation if council decides to take them up. Again, I'm willing to look at a different mix, but there you have it.
Thank you, Mayor. This is still your, I think.
All right. Do I need to check in with other officials?
Other city administration?
Then members of the public who would like to comment on the proposed legislation from the Commission on Disabilities now can approach the podium, and each individual should introduce themselves and clarify whether they are speaking on behalf of themselves or a group. Also share your address, and I believe the president will allow for 3 minutes per person. Anyone wants to come and approach the podium or whatever microphone is most convenient? Yes.
Is it okay if I'm here in this area?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
My name is Davey McNally. I'm the chairperson for the Athens City Commission on Disabilities and have been serving on the commission for somewhere in the 8 to 9 year range at this point. My address is 10202 Alderman Road, Millfield, Ohio. So I can kind of give a little bit of background on both of the ordinances. We have written both of those ordinances with the help of a lot of volunteers, and they're really designed to, first of all, the Accessible Business Collaborative Project was really successful. If you go uptown and you have a mobility disability, around, somewhere between 40 to 45% of the buildings are inaccessible. They just are. And I think there's a larger hurdle for a lot of those businesses and buildings due to the historic nature of uptown. There's a step, 2 steps. You know, it's kind of fiscally impossible for a lot of those businesses or buildings to become accessible. It was a very successful grant project. And last year or the year before, I think it was the year before last, I believe, where, you know, we were able to meet with, and we had a committee with the Disability Commission and some city administration as well. And we selected the grant recipients. It worked really well. So we'd like to continue something along those lines. I'd be willing to come down from 50-50, maybe like some kind of split. I think, you know, you want to use like more of a carrot than a stick. I don't want to go around and sue every business uptown. That's like not, I think, an effective use of time. I'd rather find some collaborative ways to make the businesses in Athens accessible. So this seems like a good idea. The second ordinance is to have an ADA transition plan in place. An ADA transition plan is a requirement under 1990 ADA Act. It's been, the city's known about that. It was in the 2010 resolution as well as stated, and it just hasn't gotten done. I know that city administration got back to us in our open letter that we sent back in September saying it was planning to get done in 2025. So we had already started this ordinance. We'd like to just kind of codify that to make sure that that gets done. In terms of the big budget expenses, I think we really appreciate the city spending the money on improvements throughout the city. I think a lot of these are coming from bigger grants that come in. So like the Stimson Avenue corridor, the Union Street corridor, these are big money projects. I'm out of.
Okay, please
I'll go
continue.
a little bit longer. And there are also lots of parks and other things. But the meat of it is people who use wheelchairs, people with mobility disabilities can't get around a lot of the city safely. I mean, it's dangerous. There's been a lot of improvements, especially since October, that we've seen. And setting aside some money for those, like, hey, there's a strip of sidewalk that we can't get past. Let's prioritize year by year. So that's kind of what we're looking for in that second ordinance. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNally.
Thank you. Do we have others who wish to speak on this topic, particularly if you have new information to share? And when you do, if you could please introduce yourself and clarify whether you're speaking on your own behalf or on behalf of an organization, we'd appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hahn. I'm at 774 West Union Street right here in Athens. I am a member of the Commission on Disabilities and the Pedestrian Accessibility Bicycle Task Force. So I'm sort of lots of hats today. The part that Micah didn't read out loud, 46 different cities between 10,000 and 50,000 residents sued and lost because they did not comply with the ADA sidewalks. So that's not to say that it could happen, but that's to say that it's not something that you can just pass off as, oh, who's gonna do it? 46 people did and won. They may not have made the news as much as like Toledo did or Philadelphia or New York City or Los Angeles. Fine, they're big, yeah, they're different, but just to say 46. I have to laugh a little, Steve. Yeah, oh, you could apply, but that doesn't mean that we have to say yes. We can say no to that grant. Anybody can apply for it. You can fill out a form, really easy to do, but we don't have to say yes. We can say no. So that would be part of the application process, is that here are some things here's some requirements you have to meet in order for us to consider this as a possibility. And we have the right to say no, which we certainly would. I work for OU, I would never, ever, ever in my a million years say, yeah, sure, the city will pay for that. That's just not going to happen. So we would obviously reserve the right to say no. That's not a given. So anyway, we did fund that 50-50 2 years ago. The first iteration of this grant was a 50-50 match. And I don't know that anybody was necessarily upset about that. At that time, it was very successful. You benefit from it going to Bagel Street Deli every time you walk in there. You benefit from that. They benefit from that, obviously. It brings people into town, which means that the entire economy of the city of Athens benefits from that. So it's a really great thing. It's not just supporting businesses, it's also supporting the amount of money that you can collect from taxes, sales taxes, people that come in. The disability community is 19% of the population, and they cover 3% of the economic income possibilities. So if you want to increase your income by 3%, this is a really great way to do it. Really easy way, great way to show community, great way to be supportive of people in your community and support that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before we move to council members for comment, do we have additional members of the public? Please come forward and introduce yourself, letting us know if you are part of an organization. Please share your address and we'll take your comments.
Hi, I'm George Turner. I will be speaking on behalf of myself. I live on the university. And just a comment on the universities, for example, mishandling or misapplying for this grant. The university is working on its own ADA transition plan and has even expressed interest on collaborating with the town on funding and improving our infrastructure for everybody. It's been 35 years now nearing 35 years since the passage of ADA. And although 19% of the population represents those currently with disabilities, anyone can age into mobility impairment and be injured. And so I urge that this is an investment in everybody in the future of our town. And the numbers, you may change them as you see fit, but I think it's very important to consider the implications of this project in the long term for the good of everybody and for the equity of those that this issue is currently most important to. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else from the public? All right, as council's liaison to the Commission on Disabilities, I did just want to share my observation that this does seem like a great collaborative opportunity where we indeed have some engaged citizens from the community who are serving on the commission, cooperating with the administration on various initiatives, and also providing some philosophical feedback about not just wanting to see us make ADA improvements when we are doing capital projects that are required to have new ADA compliant facilities, but to be more proactive in budgeting for these sort of things and having line items in the budget. So you'll see some of that language in here. So I'm pleased that we have our auditor and our mayor and lots of caring individuals up here to take, and our law director, because I think there may be one or two legal questions about these sort of things. And I'd like to, I don't know if you'd like me to call on council members one at a time or, okay, council members with comments and questions about this topic. Member Swank.
When we get to the business part of the meeting tonight, the fifth item on the agenda is renewal of the Sunday Creek Horizons contract. And one of the projects that Director Stone has enumerated in that contract is for Sunday Creek Horizons to work on this transition plan on behalf of the city. So this will be happening in 2025. Second thing, I agree with the mayor 100% about the arbitrary figure of 20%. I do like the idea, though, that as we are doing street projects and the like, that we make sure that if it's a mile-long project we're working on, that the entire mile is made compliant with the state, local, and federal laws. So I do agree with the mayor. There may be some projects where it's actually 25%, and others where it may be 3 or 4. We may want to tweak that language a little bit, dropping the specific percentage amount and addressing the fact when and where appropriate. And then the third thing, and also picking up on the mayor, does say this, the way this is written, grant recipients shall be selected by members of the Athens City Commission on Disabilities, which was just highlighted, and the city administration. So that does have some oversight and control so that we're just not willy-nilly that anybody who applies gets it. So I think this is a great start, a little tweaking here. Mayor's highlighted some areas, as has the Disabilities Commission. But it is something we need to work on incrementally so that someday, as much as possible, can be accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Member Swank. Member Spielness.
Yeah, I think some good points have been made, but I do think that some criteria so people, any applicants would know if they qualify. I mean, it seems a little too arbitrary to say, well, they can decide which ones. I think some I mean, that's normal for a grant is to have some qualifications. So I think that could be more clearly stated.
And I do believe that since they have successfully piloted this, that there is helpful guidance language in the application materials. Member Thomas?
Yeah, just speaking on the grant part, in just full transparency, my business did benefit from one of their grants last year. I forget what, earlier in the year. It's all blended together. We do not own our space, we rent, but we just felt when we learned of this program that it was one worth doing. And we really didn't even ask our landlord whether he wanted to contribute or not. But I could also say from a business standpoint, even a lower mix on the percentages on the business side, or a higher mix for the business, we would have participated also. Anything helps, and if it makes it more likely to be possible from a city standpoint and a budgeting standpoint, you know, we would have done it also. So just support of that.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions about the proposed legislation from members of council? I did want to point out, since this is a collaborative effort and we do have some separation of powers, some of the language in the drafted ordinances indicates that council would be directing the administration or auditor to do specific things, which isn't within council's power. So I did want to point out that there are opportunities to adjust this such that council could, for example, substitute words like council authorizes the administration to appropriate a certain amount of funds toward a project or encourages. But I just wanted to clarify, and the law director can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a common misperception that council can tell the mayor what to do.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments from council members? With that, do we move on then?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Member McCary. Moving on to the next committee on our agenda, and that is the Planning and Development Committee. And that committee is led by Councilmember Swank and joined by members Thomas, Spielness, and Mr. Wood, who is not present. I would like everybody. Share that.
Want to do that first?
Yeah, Clerk Walker just reminded me that I did amend the agenda at the beginning of the meeting to add an appropriation under Committee of the Whole, yet I neglected to bring that forward as an agenda item. I apologize to Member Clodfelter with her toe to have to ask her to come back up. Member Reisner, Member McCary, I apologize. And actually, Member Reisner, this is a finance and personnel item. If you are...
Well, I have some pertinent information about it.
Okay, good.
This is a request from Judge Grace requesting a fund transfer in the amount of $63,931.88 from Fund 237, which is the DUI fund, to Fund 101, General Fund. These funds will be used to reimburse the general fund for a portion of the personnel expenses for 2 court employees. Since these grant funds, the transfer needs to occur within the 2024 fiscal year, so we'll have to come forward with an ordinance next week and suspend the rules and pass it. That's all the information I have.
City administration, anything to add on this court transfer? Members of the public, anything to comment, question about the court? Other members of the administration? Yes, I'm.
Well,
Auditor
I
Heck?
was just going to maybe clarify the reason he's transferring this money back to the general fund has to do with the personnel costs that we have absorbed into the general fund on behalf of court. And a lot of his funds he can't use for personnel, but he found that he could on this, and that we would really like this to happen this year in our books.
Thank you. Now, any Treasurer Council? Anyone from the public? Okay, council members, any comments or questions on this appropriation we will see next week? Yes, Member Cloudfield.
It is refreshing to have someone propose to give money back to the general fund.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I apologize for that little interlude, especially to Member Cloudfelter as she humbles back to her lower seat. Okay, excuse me, Member Swank, it's your committee.
All right, I don't think this one will be nearly as long as the last 3. What we're talking about this evening is a proposed development on Pomeroy Road. If you go out Richland Avenue to what's commonly called the South Y and make a left on Pomeroy Road, which is also known as Old 33, as soon as you get past Florimore there on your right, right across the little creek is a vacant area. For many, many years, what you came to first was a very, very nice flower garden that was tended very well every summer, and then now a lot next to it that is mowed. We have a representative this evening from Aspire Development, the company who is proposing this development, Mr. Sean McMickle. And to give background information on this before we turn it over to the administration and then open it to the public and then council, I would invite Mr. McMickle to approach the podium and share anything and everything he would. And you're not on the 3-minute clock, so don't worry.
Thank you. That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Sean McMickle, and I'm with Spire Development. We are an affordable housing developer based out of Columbus, Ohio, and we are the applicant behind the proposed rezoning along Pomeroy Road. Again, thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to present on our proposed project. A little background on Spire Development. As I mentioned, we specialize in affordable housing solely, and we've done 37 projects across the Midwest and Arizona. We have properties in Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Michigan, and then Arizona as well. Ohio is our main state, however. We have 17 projects in Ohio, one very recently awarded within the city of Athens, Blackburn Landing. This property will be located at 142 Albany Avenue next to the River Annex Apartments. And we're very pleased to be a part of the Athens community with that project, which we anticipate hopefully closing in the spring of 2025. And then we would also love the opportunity to bring more affordable housing to the city of Athens through this proposed Pomeroy Landing project. So part of how we develop affordable housing is we use the federal tax credit program. And there are a number of these projects within city limits, so I don't want to belabor. I'm happy to go into depth on any aspect of the program as necessary. But at a high level, the tax credit program is a federal program in which federal tax credits are allocated by the state, and the tax credits are sold for equity to help fund construction costs to build affordable housing. In exchange for the tax credit equity, developers are capped in the amount of rent that they can charge. So these properties are charge rents that are affordable to individuals that are at certain percentages of the median income of the county of Athens. And so there will be a range of incomes. The average overall for the project is 60% of the area median income. And I'm happy to go more in depth, again, on all of the specifics of the program if it is valuable. It's worth noting that this is a very competitive funding source. And at the end of the day, the way this source is currently allocated, it comes down to the census tract that you are located in as to what makes a competitive and compelling application at the state level. And so we have arrived at the Pomeroy Road site because we feel that it meets a lot of the city's goals in regards to addressing affordable housing. The site is in a very walkable area. We are committed to extending sidewalks and additional infrastructure to the site to improve walkability of the Pomeroy Road corridor. The section that we are looking at developing is flat, and so we won't have any issues with accessible route or accessibility with this portion of the project. And it also meets identified goals within the comprehensive plan, the 2040 plan, specifically increasing access to public transport, public transportation, affordable housing, and specifically to the South Side Mechanicsburg section of the comprehensive plan to rezone large parcels between Blackburn and Richland to R3. And so with that, we feel very strongly that the property in question is a good fit for R3 zoning. Specifically, it is abutting existing multifamily housing to the north. There is commercial uses to the north as well. Also across the street, commercial, there's a veterinarian office, and it abuts residential to the east. The south side of the property is a hillside, and at this point, we are proposing 50 or more units on this 8.2 acres, and we are proposing to leave the hillside as green space to preserve natural beauty within Athens. I understand there may be a desire for additional single-family home development within the community. There are some single-family home funding programs at the state level that we can assess the feasibility for. That would be more suitable for further east on the property. We have a total of 28 acres under option. However, we are only proposing rezoning the 8.2 acre portion for R3 multifamily. So a little bit about the development in its own right. It'll be a general occupancy development, meaning there are no age restrictions in order to live in the property. It will be a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and it will have a variety of amenities, including community spaces, on-site management. It will have a outdoor picnic area, playground, security cameras, and we believe that it'll be a good fit for the Pomeroy Road corridor, which I believe may be contemplated for it as a future business corridor within the city. And so I understand that there may be some questions or concerns within the community that I would like to proactively address in hopes to maybe answer some questions that may be present within the neighborhood. I believe there was a flyer circulated, and so there were a variety of individual concerns that were raised. And so, again, I would just like to touch on some of these in order to hopefully answer some questions that may be outstanding. One of the bullet points states that we are proposing 50 to 80 units, which would allow 800 residents or more, which, while it is true we are proposing 50 or more units, 800 residents would be far in excess of what could possibly fit in this property. That would be 15 people per bedroom. Or per unit rather. So, but to another additional concern is that we are seeking to purchase and demolish homes for additional parking. And so that is not necessarily the case in this proposed rezoning. So at this present time, we are proposing to rezone the 8.2 acres to R3. And we are able to fit a 50 plus unit development on just that property alone. I have reached out to neighboring properties to share more about the proposed project and to also assess their interest and if they would have an interest in selling their property. But at this point in time, we don't have any purchase contracts in place, and that would not be a part of what we are proposing this evening. Part of the reason for reaching out to, for proposing acquiring additional land, not that we need it for this specific proposal, but if we were to do more units, that would be the only way that we would financially be able to even acquire additional property, is if we were able to fit more units as a part of this proposal. So that would be the only way that we would acquire additional houses. And so there's a rumor that we may be seeking to acquire houses to knock them down for parking, and that is not the case. That wouldn't make financial sense, or would it be a good use of land in the community. Another concern raised is that the project is not needed. It states that Athens has a 15% vacancy rate. I can only assume that they're referring to a 15% vacancy rate at the county level for rental housing. However, we commission third-party arm's length market studies for all of our properties. It's a requirement of the state and also a good practice to understand the market for these types of housing projects. And for our Blackburn Landing project that was just awarded this past funding round, that is not the case. They are finding that for affordable housing stock specifically within the primary market area, what the primary market area is defined as is a boundary around the city limits. It's within a few miles of city limits. Specifically, affordable housing projects within the primary market area are 100% occupied. There are no vacancies. And that indicates that there's a shortage of this housing type because there are no vacancies present. Furthermore, comparable market rate properties are 97% occupied, which also further illustrates that although there may be a vacancy rate throughout the county specific to this area, that is not the case. And also, if there happen to be vacancies outside of the city area, that doesn't necessarily mean they are close to employers. That doesn't mean that they are accessible. That doesn't mean that they are fit for individuals to live in. And so we feel strongly that there is adequate demand for this property or for this project, and that the market is reflecting as such. Another concern that's been raised is there's other available R3 land around the city. And I do want to go back to that census tract statement earlier. This funding source specifically is related to the census tract that you're located in. There was a vacant R3 property, and that is the property that we will be developing Blackburn Landing on. Outside of that, there are no vacant R3 properties that are also for sale and that are adequate for developing this type of a project. We feel strongly that this particular property is the best suited within the census tract for what we are proposing. And again, it is tied to that census tract. Even if we were to find vacant R3 land in other areas of the city, it would not be competitive from a funding standpoint. Another concern that has been raised is that predatory out-of-town buyers are buying up available land so that new local homeowners are priced out of the market. We are an Ohio-based firm. We're from Columbus. We're an hour down the road. There is a lot of interest from out-of-state developers in the tax credit program, but Spire Development has, over the last 7 years, received funding for 17 of these Ohio projects, and as I mentioned, one will be in Athens. We have 4 projects in Appalachia, and we have 2 in Parkersburg as well. And so we don't see ourselves as out-of-towners. We will be a part of the community for years to come with the Blackburn Landing property. And specific to this parcel that we are discussing this evening, we're not necessarily buying up available land so that local homeowners are priced out of the market. This particular property has some stormwater management issues, which I'll address in a few moments. But the reality is that this parcel, there's a flat section that's over an acre, and then the hillside is very steep, and the existing conditions are pretty much cost prohibitive to develop a one-off single-family home development on that property. The land has been vacant for years, and we will repurpose it for an asset that will provide value within the community. And furthermore, the hillside that is adjoining our property, the additional parcels to make up the entire 28 acres that at this point we're leaving untouched. Again, those aren't necessarily conducive to developing single-family homes at this juncture due to the topography of the land. Another issue that was raised as a concern is that large low-income apartments will drive down property values. The fact is that we hope to bring north of $275,000 in investment per unit as a part of this project. It's a project that we feel will bring a lot of further investment to the Pomeroy Road corridor, which I understand may be contemplated as a business corridor in the future. And it will not necessarily drive down property values. There's existing multifamily adjacent to our site that has not affected property values. And we feel that that is not necessarily, while I can understand that concern being raised, we don't think that it should be given too much concern. Anticipated increased crime is listed as another issue, potentially. All of our residents undergo credit, background, and employment checks as part of the rental process. And due to state oversight, oftentimes residents are, we are more stringent in selecting our residents as compared to certain market rate properties because we have such a heavy compliance burden for these properties. Flash flooding on Pomeroy Road and Richland Avenue. We're aware that the flat area that we are proposing to redevelop can get wet in heavy rainfalls. And so we, as part of any commercial size development, we actually improve the on-site conditions in regard to stormwater. Specifically, Athens County requires the critical storm method of stormwater management, which is we will do an analysis of a 1-year rain event of the amount of runoff from the property. And then there will be calculations involved for the additional impervious surface that we are introducing as part of our development. From there, a published calculation is used to detain above and beyond what we are disturbing. So we may be detaining up to a 500-year event. We have not done the calculations yet, as the proposed site plan is merely that, just a conceptual site plan for proof of concept. We're far from the engineering stage. But the fact is that we will be improving the on-site stormwater management, and we will be detaining it on site. So we will be improving it for neighbors, and then it is slowly released into the existing storm system. Increased traffic concerns and risk of accidents. So Richland Avenue in particular is, if you look at the Ohio Department of Transportation, they have a traffic tracker. Richland Avenue currently receives well over 5,331 daily average trips. When you look at Institute of Traffic Engineer traffic impact analysis as for our projects, we look at that for every project that we do. Peak hour trips, so the most trips that would occur within a single hour would be around 20 or so trips, 20 or more. And so in reality, that is less than a 1% impact on the total daily average. Furthermore, Pomeroy Road, further up, it is further up the road. In reality, it's not a very good comparable, but there are over 2,285 average daily trips. So again, what we are proposing will have a small impact on the overall traffic in the area. Lack of public notice has been identified as a concern. And so we have followed all appropriate procedures. We're just following the letter of the city law. I have reached out independently to adjacent landowners immediately touching our site to share more about the property and the proposed rezoning. I'm welcome further outreach for those that would like to learn more about the project. Happy to share more in depth if they would like to learn more. Also, I believe there may be some concern that Spire Development does not have a right to present on this proposed rezoning. We submitted a copy of our purchase agreement that is in place for the property. And so we are acting as an agent of the owner. We feel very strongly, the contract specifically states that the purchaser is to apply for a rezoning. But I did circulate this evening to the planning staff a copy of the site plan signed by the landowner and also a letter confirming that Spire Development is acting as an agent for the landowner for this proposed rezoning, in case there were any concerns or doubt as to the intent of the landowner's intentions for this rezoning. So then a final bullet point is that that there needs to be a need to protect Athens families and the neighborhoods they live in. And we feel strongly that what we are proposing does just that. What we are proposing is providing an affordable housing option for people that are within the city that are housing burdened. They can't afford to pay their rent. They're paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. This project will help to alleviate that burden on individuals that are in need of an affordable housing option. Again, it's when you look at the primary market area, it is within the city. We're not necessarily bringing people from outside of the city within. And we feel that, as was mentioned earlier, that there is a need for housing at all different price points, whether it be affordable, single-family homes, condos. Housing is truly an ecosystem to where an increase of stock will help to increase housing options within the community for all different types. So the national housing shortage is really a product of supply, and we are helping to alleviate that. We are helping to bring more supply to the community to help alleviate some of the housing shortage that exists. So that was quite a bit of information, and I'm sure there are many questions. But I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address anything that may be a question or concern.
Mr. Mickle, we may call you back up for the questions. Our process is to the mayor, the citizens, members of council. At that time, we may call you back up for questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Mayor Patterson.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Members of the public, come forward, state your name and address, please, and President Crow will put you on the clock. 3-minute boxing round. It's right behind the podium there.
So I would like to, am I coming through okay?
Perfect.
So I would like to speak as a representative of the members who signed the petition that you received. I will stand by the comments made in that petition.
Could you please tell us your name and address, please?
My apologies.
Yes, sir.
My apologies. I'm Aaron Leatherwood. I live just a stone's throw from this proposed development. And I've been a resident of Athens for nearly all of my life. So sort of backing up, I will stand by the statements made in the petition that the contract that Spire Development submitted with the application, the zoning application that they submitted, did not authorize them to act as an agent of the seller. They may have subsequently obtained some sort of agency document or some sort of subsequent attempt to ratify this. City Code has no provision for ratification of an application for which they didn't have standing in the first place. So I would ask that the council reject this application, return it to the Planning Commission, and if they want to reapply at a time when they are clearly the agent of the seller, we can restart this process. As suggested in the petition, a secondary driver here is that while everyone would agree that the Planning Commission's meetings have been open to the public, no reasonable person would say that there was substantive public input. At the first meeting, there were 3 attendees. They swear people in at the beginning. The camera panned the room. There were 3 attendees. There was Mr. McMickles from Spire Development. There was another local landlord who had business before the commission, and there was a representative of the Board of Zoning Appeals. At the second hearing on November 20th, there were also 3 attendees, Mr. McMickles again, and 2 individuals who did not speak. I don't know who they were. They were young, and they did not participate. So the statement that there's been 0 public participation up until now is a very accurate statement. It's just disappointing that we would land here as a city. I don't know what the city's process is or what it should be, but it's not achieving where it should reasonably be. And so that's all I have in that capacity. I have some additional people have asked to have their names added to the petition.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Leatherwood. Other members of the community would like to speak.
Good evening, council members. My name is Frank Fugate. My address is 1900 Bedford Road, Columbus, Ohio. I'm a property owner at 536 Richland Avenue. It's the property that's adjacent to the Marathon gas station, a little bit to the north. I'm here tonight of my concern of the increased sedimentation and rainwater runoff during and after construction. During the construction, it'll be, if this is approved by council and this rezoning, it'll be fall of 2025 or spring of 26 construction project. I'm worried about at that period, during the construction, especially since they're going to be crossing this creek, increased sedimentation. It's falling into this creek, coming down across Pomeroy Road and behind Richland Avenue. And then I'm also concerned after, and I understand the process of with the construction, the engineering and all that, that there will not be increased water flow. It'll be retained on the property. I understand how that all works. My concern is the engineering firm is paid for and presented by the developer. I'm asking the city council and the city engineer, if this project again moves forward, that they monitor this situation. They look at this design to make sure that there is not any more increased water flow. And then the other thing I'm asking is the tree commission takes it very serious with what they do. The tree commission requires quite a few trees on a property. I know it's a wooded plot. I understand that, but I'm looking at these trees and this vegetation, this landscaping is created to slow down the water flow, to do what it's supposed to do, and just not be, we're going to do this. So let me back up for 1 second. I've owned this property. My family's owned this property at 536 Richland Avenue for 50 years. I was a young man when my father bought it. And what has happened is through the years, because of construction and just time, the creek used to be 3 feet deep. You walk in the middle of it and you'd be 3 or 4 feet. Now it's about 18 inches because it's totally filled in with sedimentation. And most of it came from the road construction, but different things have impacted it. The issue now is with this creek bed being filled in, the worst flooding that occurs is because of the small bridge that's just to the north of my property that does not allow water to flow under it very well. It's about 2 feet right now for the water flow. So what happens is...
You may continue.
Excuse me?
You may continue.
Thank you. The water flow backs up and now creates a flood in my front yard. The backyard has the creek in it. The backyard is designed to fill up, flow, and go away. What we need to do is to make sure, I can't really take any more sediment at all in this creek. And that's my real concern. I've talked to the city, I've talked to the city engineer, I've talked to other administration. There is a study. The city has requested a study from the Corps of Engineers. I've waited for 9 months. I don't know the exact details of when the study was requested, but this study has not come back yet. And so because of a lot of the property is in the FEMA floodplain, the city is not really allowed to go in there and dredge, and I don't even like to use that word, but do things with the creek, to clean it up and do things. The city's done a great job in getting branches out. They've kind of pulled some stuff back where they can and not get in trouble. But until we get this study back from the Corps of Engineers, our hands are tied. The city's hands are tied, from what I understand, from the information I have. If there's further information, please let me know.
Thank you, sir. Please complete your comments.
I feel that Spire's development should not move forward until you get this Corps of Engineers report. I think this is an important thing. I've waited over 9 months for this. The other thing is, in the zoning code about flood damage prevention and city obligation to its residents, section 25.01.02 grants statutory authorization to municipalities to adopt land use and control measures to protect others from flooding. I'm asking that council and the planning and look at that. And the last thing I have is hillside regulations. You know, they're developing on slopes that are greater than 15%. They're developing on soils that are slippery. Again, I think I press upon council and administration and the engineer to make sure that they review this. If you read the hillside, they're supposed to provide subdividers shall submit detailed information concerning geologic conditions, soil types, underground water level, in order that determination can be made by the planning commission as the safety of the community. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fugate. Before we have any other people from the audience, I noticed that the mayor seemed to, would you want to interject something at this point in time, or do you want to wait till we've had all of community participate?
Just to the question
Yes,
raised
sir.
about the Corps of Engineers
Yes, sir.
study of that Coates Run waterway. I appreciate you bringing that up. I've often thought that oftentimes local governments and state governments operate at a snail's pace. We actually are sprinters when it comes to working with the Corps of Engineers. I'm not dissing the Corps of Engineers. It's such a slow, lengthy process to go through with the Corps. You're correct that we did get notification that there was going to be a study on Coates Run. A lot of that was predicated upon what we're seeing in the Hocking River as well. But the silting is an issue. And so what I will do is I'll get you the information that we have most recently received from the Corps in terms of what is their plan of completing the study, starting the study. I can get that for you. It's very laborious.
So, speaking for what I know, and I didn't go into the detail of it, but I spoke with Andy Stone today, and Andy's expecting to study it sometime relatively soon. But it's been like, we know that the Corps moves slower than glaciers. So we'll anticipate this, but I really do think this study is going to be important, and I think it's going to give us some pressure points where we can reduce the water flow or increase the water flow.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the community who would like to speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Eric Lucas. I'm here to represent our family that owns Carpet One Floor and More at 7 Pomeroy Road. I was never contacted by Spires Construction. I see somebody out in my parking lot with stakes going along. I heard it through the grapevine. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, and the mayor knows, and I appreciate all that he's done for us, but we have flooded, we've been there, getting ready to start our 48th year. And we do own the building. And that across the creek where you're talking about does not flood on that side. It all comes down from Coventry. And we have done everything possible, building berms, putting sandbags. It flooded our store. We had 3.5 foot of water in our store. I lost over $50,000 worth of product, not to mention the mud, it was a disaster. And anybody that's been through a flood would understand this. We lost 10 years of records that flooded out. It damaged our building. Nobody, Mayor Patterson was wonderful in coming down to check on us. This has not been an issue until probably around 2017. And if you'll come, I welcome anybody to come and walk the property with me, and I will show you where it comes through. It's like a river. And literally, when the last big flood that we had, when it subsided, there was a koi goldfish in the back of my store on the sidewalk. Now, where did it come from? Okay, well, it didn't come from that creek. So there is the Hocking, everything flows in the Hocking. So how, I'm not a smart man when it comes to the engineering part, but how do you create more, they said they're gonna have it on site, but I don't know, I'm very skeptical. I was told that there's not much that can be done, that, we're a small business. Like I said, we've been part of the community for going on 48 years, and it affects us and our employees. My goal, I'm all for affordable housing. I love Athens. I love the people. I appreciate the city's support and those that have reached out to me. But this caught me by total surprise. I was not communicated with, And I was just very disappointed in that. I had to hear it through my customer that now that was getting ready to purchase, now is not going to purchase because their house is being bought. And they came to us in tears wondering, what's going on. And I have pictures. The other problem is that corner, people do not do 35 down the Pomeroy Hill. I don't know how many times I've come close to getting wiped out. I look both ways and look back again. There's somebody shooting down the hill. I've talked to the police about sitting there. We have to back semis in. Again, I have a picture. I can show you multiple pictures of just trying to back a semi in. And it's going to be extremely dangerous. Right now, the foliage is off by the bridge, but when it's in full bloom, you cannot see around that corner. The sidewalk, if they put a sidewalk in, that's going to take probably 4 of my parking spots. And with semis running over that, who's going to pay for that? I'm going to be the one responsible. So as a small business and a community member, I beg you to look into this further because it does affect our lives, and it was horrible, and we've gone through it multiple times. So if anybody wants to come to and visit and look at that and see the pictures, I'll be happy to share them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please share your name and address.
Sure. Jerry Miller, 14 Canterbury Drive. There are 3 particular points I'd like to address. The first one is community building. And I think when you look at that space, it's an ideal place, most certainly. And it should be welcoming. There are 2 points here. The size of the complex that's being proposed is anything but community building, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration. The number of individuals being welcomed into that particular neighborhood, and the neighborhood and those new individuals becoming a part of it. So I would really like to draw that to the attention that I think it's much too large. Another part of the community building is an element of trust. Like Eric and others, finding out on Facebook that this is happening is not the way to learn. Surprise isn't persuasion. Surprise is not community building. Informing individuals of the potential of this so we can come and talk about these issues beforehand is the ideal situation, but that's gone. Another point is the traffic. In late September, out of concern of the Kershaw Green traffic, the pedestrian traffic and the vehicle traffic, I decided to walk that, and I did take my life into my own hands in doing that. It's my understanding that that's now being addressed. My concern here is that will also need to be addressed at that intersection of Pomeroy and Richland Avenue. It is dangerous. I walk it every day, and I have to jump out of the way. I've seen people running back and forth from the dispensary to the gas station at their own risk. The whole area would have to be reconfigured in order to address this particular issue. And it's not just the access to the proposed complex, it's all the other businesses and homes that are in that stretch that are going to have to be reconfigured, but beyond a simple sidewalk. And so my question is, who's going to pay for that, that particular cost? And how is that going to impact the residents, the businesses, and the individuals who live in there? The other issue that I want to bring up, and I think it was Shay who mentioned this, gentle and moderate density. Again, going back to this size of a complex, it's anything but gentle and moderate density. It is an ideal location, but certainly for a much smaller complex. Along those lines, and this is my last comment, I do want the members of the council and members of the community to recognize a couple of the statements that the representatives from the Spire Investment mentioned at this time. There were several references that we're not doing this at this time. We're not buying property at this time. We're not building additional homes at this time. Where does that end? I will stop.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other community members at this time?
Hello, my name is Joe Radwinny, and I live in Lee Township, north of Albany. but I do most of my work in the city of Athens, and therefore I help pay all your salaries. So thank you for listening, and I absolutely appreciate your service. I've done a lot of work in that neighborhood, not only on Richland Avenue, Pomeroy, Canterbury, and I can tell you, well, first I'd remind you that that whole neighborhood used to be a swamp 150 years ago. The hydrology there is tenuous at best. Richland was one of the first that underwent the Stimson, Union Street redevelopment saga, and it still floods. I work on a house that's up on the hill across from the hardware store. That hill is slipping, and they've talked to Andy Stone about it, and the city blames the state, and the state says the city's got to deal with it, and it just seems like we're opening a whole nother can of worms, especially on hydrology. So the main thing I wanted to say is it seems like a really bad, low spot to try to build anything, and talk about a one-year rainwater retention plan. Seems like we have a 50-year flood about every 2 or 3 years lately. And I don't know that that's going to get any better with climate change and all. And again, to reiterate what they were saying about traffic, that is a tricky and dangerous intersection with multiple highways to get on and off of 2 different major interstates at that intersection, Old Pomeroy and then Richland. I would urge the city to take a step back, not rezone, rethink and really look at plans before they rezone, rather than just take developers, albeit, I'm sure you're well-meaning, but they know how to crunch numbers and say the right things. But we've seen the kind of damage that wanton development can do on situations like that. Again, I thank y'all. I appreciate your progressive and positive intentions, but you got to look at the underlying sustainability of the funding, and that's what I hear. And I was here last year at this time of year. You have to juggle money from this book to that book, and money does not grow on trees. So, again, I appreciate all your service, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we have one more speaker.
My name is Chris McCauley. I live on 25 Pomeroy Road, just up from where he wants to put the entrance to this project. And I agree with someone else here that mentioned sometimes they come flying off that hill. The entrance to their property that they want to put there is right in a curve at a blind spot with an intersection of another street. So my concern is partly safety. I'd like to mention one other thing. He said he couldn't guarantee that our property values wouldn't go down. I can guarantee you that they will go down for this project. It's my opinion, but I still guarantee it. First of all, I want to say that I'm all for affordable housing. I think it's a great thing. We need that. I don't think this is the location, but I'm also for R1 residentials remaining R1s for our safety, our health, and ecological preservations. A couple of things. I mentioned the safety concerns, and we have children in this area also, and they do fly off that hill. It is not safe. Occasionally, we've had city police, and I appreciate law enforcement, come there and sit in our driveway even. We've even offered them coffee while they're there. And as far as the flooding and erosion, and it floods back there every once in a while. We moved here 30 plus years ago, and because it was an R1 section, because it had a beautiful hillside back there and a creek that runs through it, and wildlife, and most of all you here would appreciate that kind of a setting. But I'm concerned if they start shaving the top of that hill off, what are going to be the results? Landslides and destruction of wildlife and all those beautiful trees. And this is a city of trees, is it not? Don't we want people to plant trees? Haven't we had tree planting projects? And in Menards, they had to have so many trees down there before they could start their project. Is that not correct? So I do have a concern for ecological preservation. Like I said, we moved here 30 some years ago, and that was one of the main reasons. And now you want to change that. or now he wants to change it, put it that way. He mentioned also that they have another place that they could do R3 already, very readily. So leave that part alone. It's going to cause problems. It's going to cause safety, health, and ecological concerns. And that's about all I want to say. I want to thank the mayor and you all for letting me speak. Appreciate it.
Last call. Anyone else? Oh. Well, we have one over here. Can he do that? He spoke on behalf of a group and come back and.
Hello, I'm Sharon Walker. I live at 18 Pomeroy Road, immediately across the street from this proposed development. And I have a lot of concerns. I would like to reiterate what Mr. McCauley said, that R1 zones were created for single-family housing, and that is to foster a sense of community. All the families that live here on Pomeroy Road have long-term investment in the community and in their properties. Often because it was R1 zoned. We moved there just because of the zoning. We specifically did not want to live in a high-density apartment complex neighborhood. My next point, though, is this even needed? As the Athens Affordable Housing Commission reported, we have numerous developments going on the south side, including 800 residences at the Ridges. That's amazing. Is it worth the potential permanent damage to this neighborhood at Pomeroy Road? Is it going to outweigh the benefit? And yeah, I use that term loosely. There are also other available sites that are more suited for it than this particular lot. If you haven't sat on Pomeroy Road, then you don't know how they come flying down that road. There was even one instance where a car ran right into the waiting room of the vet clinic, and they had to rebuild the front of that building. The most recent and closest similar complex in the area here in Athens would have to be the Kershaw Green complex, like everyone knows. And I think everyone can agree that there have been an unanticipated stress on the current resources of the city, including police, including fire, and including safety. I actually contacted the APD this morning, and they told me that at Kershaw Green, and granted, that's the other side of town, but it's a similar intended complex. They have 345 calls to that property this year alone. That's almost one every day. Are you guys going to be able to divert resources to Pomeroy Road in the similar way that they're being diverted to Kershaw Green? The traffic, he cited Richland Avenue. Well, Richland Avenue is not Pomeroy Road. There are traffic issues. There are flooding issues. Even putting a sidewalk on that road is a safety issue. And so I am going to encourage you to not rezone this area. Because after you rezone it, there's no going back. There's no going back to R1. And the implications, I don't think, have been properly investigated. I don't think they've been properly addressed. And we absolutely cannot take his word for it, because there are a lot of things he said that were not true. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm Rob Delich. I live on Morris Avenue here in the city, and just representing myself. I don't want to say a whole lot, except that I actually do support this project. We do need it. It is the best location. People have talked about other locations would be better. No, this is the place that makes the most sense. One is because of the accessibility potential the area has. Other locations, Hooper Road, for example, is half a mile from the sidewalk. It just doesn't even make sense to put a development up there. This is a place where there are amenities nearby, but the Athens Bicycle Club is responsible for cleaning up this section of Pomeroy Road. I've been on that road many times and organized those cleanups. The area's been neglected, let me say, by the city. Richland has been reconstructed down a ways, but not anywhere. The south end of Richland needs to be rebuilt in a similar fashion to improve its safety, to improve its economic development potential, this area connected to that also needs to be addressed. And I really feel strongly that this is an opportunity to also make those kind of improvements. There may be the potential for the developer to chip into some of that, but mostly that's going to probably be city-managed projects funded with grants from ODOT. City's really good at leveraging those ODOT state and federal dollars to make those kind of improvements, and I think that that's a critical thing here. And it could really improve the lives of everyone living in this area, even if those things happen. I think that's enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. One more. Okay.
Shay Myers, Meadow Lane here in the city. I want to also speak in support of this rezone. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, although I do sit on the Affordable Housing Commission, and affordable housing is an important subject. It's an important topic for me personally and professionally as someone who works in the design industry and the building industry. You know, if you look at our zoning map in our city, it might appear like we have a lot of R3 land, a lot of potential for these higher density developments, but the reality is that's not true. We have very little land, allowable for anything other than single family residential. Most of our land is designated R1. We have a very small amount of R2, and then we have a decent amount of R3, and a lot of that's owned by the university. We really need housing at pretty much every price point and for every demographic. And while there are some good projects in the works, thinking long term about the housing problem that we have, the Ridges development, which is those units are likely, those types of projects tend to be delayed. Those units are not going to be online for quite some time. We need to continue to provide new housing in areas where it makes sense, in areas that need these kinds of infrastructure improvements. I can appreciate the concerns about traffic and infrastructure, and these types of developments can help support those kinds of changes that need to be made that help with walkability, community building, and safety in terms of traffic. So I think that this is a good parcel to be rezoned to R3, and I think that while no project is perfect, I do think it's an appropriate use for this site.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Hunter from 204 Elmwood Place. I would like to speak on behalf of the Pedestrian Accessibility and Bicycle Task Force. So in the previous ad hoc pedestrian accessibility committee's 2022 pedestrian accessibility survey, one of the things in there was about the first 10 responses were from Pomeroy Road, asking for sidewalks and asking for traffic calming. So I do find it very ironic to find that suddenly nobody wants sidewalks and traffic calming. But actually, I think this is in fact the perfect opportunity for sidewalks and traffic calming in this particular area. Everyone's mentioned the cars fly. We can change that. The road didn't grow that way. We can change it. And I do have to mention, if you lose parking spaces to sidewalks, that means it's in the city right away. So if perhaps this is the time to be thinking right now, if this change is to go through, this is now the time to say, hey, how are we going to build these sidewalks and traffic calming? Let's start now. I'm the person in the video and the news articles about the Kershaw Green sidewalks. So I do know a bit about it. So let's start now, if this is what we're thinking of. Thank you.
So we only allow, unfortunately, citizens to speak one time on each subject at council meetings. Yeah, it's still just one person, one time. But we would really appreciate you and Mr. Leatherwood, if he has more to say too, to communicating with council through email or through with the city. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, now move to members of council. Comments or questions? Yeah, it's a long way.
Well, yeah, we've been talking about this a long time. We haven't even gotten to the rest of the meeting, which is going to be long. So, but I have spoken to a few people. I've read all the emails regarding this. I've talked to Sean, and he came to us initially to the Affordable Housing Commission to talk about the project, to vet it. And one of the things that we told him was, need sidewalks. You know, this is an important part of it. And he indicated that that would be certainly a possibility. I must say that in talking with Eric back there at Florinmore, I was really concerned about the flooding situation and the extreme flooding situation. So I am hoping that if this can be designed in such a way that we can resolve, and others have mentioned it too, clearly it's a bigger problem than I certainly realized, and many other people did too, although I understand the mayor's been very nice about inquiring about it. But I'm hoping that as part of this, if we can pass this, that, and by the way, remember, we're only looking at changing zoning in this conversation. There's other steps to be made. So, but I'm hoping that as part of their deliberation on this, that they can really look at the impacts of that and be very responsible to their nearby business owners. As I told him recently today, that it was important that that his company is very responsive to small business owners and tries to make this as appealing to them as possible. I'm hoping they can buy a lot of stuff from Florinmore, and they'll have pets, so the vet should benefit. But if we go forward with this, we really have to think of all those kinds of things. I do have to say that some of the concerns that people mentioned, based on my other conversations with folks who are in the know and understand housing, that we really do need this. And as he indicated, there aren't other places where they can do this based on the funding availability and the timing. So that I fully support this, assuming that they are going to make some changes that would benefit the business and homeowners with the flooding situation. So.
Thank you. Member Thomas?
I have a bunch of questions that were very specific to just information on the project. But at this point, I feel like looking at it just from a further out view, I do have concerns, having watched the Planning Commission meetings on all of the last couple presentations for the city. I guess maybe this is for the mayor. This is, if you look at the three between Athens Gardens, Athens Annex, whatever they call it now, and Hooper Road, it could be up to 150 units in about a mile and a half. You know, do we feel we can handle that as a city? That was the first thing that really popped out on me outside of the actual projects themselves, with the questions about funding and breakdown of units and all of that. I have concerns about that and the getting to things. I know these consensus tracks, or on the census tracks, that they listed they're close to grocery stores and amenities, and there are no grocery stores next to any of these. That's old information. Those are both closed. So those are two concerns I have outside of, what we've heard tonight and just general ones. I know the process has seemed like it's off, but the Planning Commission meetings are not hearings. They're just presentations. We discuss, public hearing comes after we even decide to send it to an ordinance. I forward that entire process to Mr. Leatherwood so he could share that with everyone. So it's not a quick process. It's happening immediately or tonight. I do think we're going to want more time to look through all of this. Even in light of that, I do just have questions about the units because I think it's important to get all of the information. Looking at all of the process, I saw percentages on just rent costs and things from another chart breakdown. It looks like we're looking at rents starting at $800 for a one bedroom up to $14 if you're looking at the 60%. $920, my words are leaving. Rent breakdown if you're looking at income, 60% income. And I'm curious, it says you have an elevator, you will have units, are they all single floor units? Are they stacked if they're 2 bedrooms or more? Things like that I'm curious about also. I think that impacts the type of development it is, who's going to live there, what they're looking for, what we need. I don't think it's a real easy question. I don't know. It might be easier to send all of that in an email and get it and bring it back to Planning Commission or committee in the future too,
Okay, thank you.
if you have a preference.
When, excuse me, go ahead, sir.
I think I heard a question from you, Councilmember Thomas,
Buried in there?
buried in there. What I do know about the LIHTC projects, and this was already indicated, that these are 9% LIHTCs are extremely competitive. And so to your question about Hooper and Pomeroy, I doubt highly that OFA is going to sit there and say, okay, these are both going to get awarded. It's going to be, it's that competitive. It's going to be one versus the other. This has already been said, but I do feel compelled to at least state this out loud, and that is that the interesting thing about LIHTC projects too is that you're competitive as long as you're looking at census tracts to where they're looking at the LMI within that census tract, the average median income within that census tract. And so this has been mentioned a number of times tonight, that sure, someone can apply for a LIHTC project in, qualifying areas, but if the AMI within that area is higher than others, then you're likely not going to be awarded because of the scoring system that goes along with the LIHTC project. So I just want that to be clear, that this was mentioned earlier. Shay mentioned this, and that is that there are other R3s, there are other areas in the city, but in terms of this specific program, they likely would not be competitive. The other question that you asked was one basically, along with that question, you're asking something about the market assessment, which Spire has done that market analysis. The city doesn't do the market analysis, so I have no idea whatsoever in terms of what that market would look like if, and again, I can't imagine this happening. The WOTA project was kind of shocking because that was 2 LIHTC projects that were awarded on the property down there in 68256, 682. But again, as competitive as these are, for both of these to be awarded, that isn't going to happen. So I don't know, in terms of the market.
So when I ran for city council 3 years ago, knocked on 600 doors, one of the things I said to potential voters is, I promise you that I will make every effort to engage the community early in the process. I've been lived in this town for 45 years, and unfortunately, we have a habit of not informing the community until the train has already left the station. In many cases, not only has the train left the station, for those of you old enough, conductor's already punched your ticket. In terms of this project, I apologize to people who could potentially be affected by this. And when I and the other members of the city council got 2 emails, first thing I did was drive over to Florinmore. I took a tour, and I saw the line on the wall 3.5 feet off the floor. But what really struck me was a good portion of the merchandise in that store is now on 4-wheel dollies in case there's another flood and that material needs to be moved to higher ground. I'm going to look in the direction of the law director to ask her if she would want to weigh in, or would you be comfortable, Law Director Eliason, if I share the email that we received today at 5:17 to give everyone here an idea of what the next step most likely will be and needs to be. So President Crowell inquired about if Spire had standing to request a zoning change pursuant to Athens City Code 230903. And the response that we received today at 5:17 is this. Spire Development entered into a contract for purchase of real estate with Kennedy Joan D. Trustee with contingency in item 8.7 that, quote, this agreement is contingent upon the purchaser receiving a reservation of IRS Section 42 tax credits. Don't ask me what that is. On October 23rd, 2024, Spire Development Incorporated, care of Shama Mickle, as applicant, filed an application for zone change. Shama Mickle signed the application as owner agent. At that time, Spire Development Incorporated, care of Shama Mickle, was not the owner or lessee nor agent for the owner. Black's Law Dictionary states, quote, initiate, unquote, means to commence, start, originate, introduce. The amendment was initiated by the filing of the application for zone change on October 3rd, 2024 by Spire. The amendment was not initiated by the motion of the commission. Spire does not have standing to request a proposed zoning change pursuant to ACC 230903, and the zoning amendment was not initiated by the Planning Commission. Spire can resubmit the application as agent for the owner, along with the proof of agency for review by the Planning Commission. That is the end of the law director's statement. I will take it a step further. I've talked personally with the owner of 19 Pomeroy Road, a woman I've known for over 25 years. And in talking to her, but also talking to John Katowski, who is the chair of the Planning Commission, not only should this go back to the Planning Commission, but if there is any intent, either now or in the future, to include 19 Pomeroy Road in that, it should be done as one piece and not as piecemeal rezoning, one property at a time. So it's my opinion, based on what we received from the law director today, that Mr. McMickle, that you should resubmit this to the Planning Commission. They meet again on the 18th of December. A complete package with proof of agency for review by the Planning Commission. From that point, I would suggest it come back to committee. For those of you who wish to speak a second time this evening, you would have an opportunity at the Planning Commission to meet. And in talking with Mr. Katowski, he did say to me, you know, perhaps we need to look at this process that Member Thomas referenced to notify the people affected potentially by any development or any rezoning, so that they too can come and raise a hand and swear to tell the truth at the Planning Commission. The mayor is a member of that Planning Commission. And again, by doing that, what do we end up doing? We engage the public early in the process. So that's the end of the committee meeting of the whole. I spoke too early when I said this would be a short one. And the suggestion per the law director would be to return this to the Planning Commission, and their next meeting is the 18th of this month, I believe.
Thank you, Member Swank. I would invite the rest of the council to return to the dais. We will be moving on to our special session. Our first order of business is to establish quorum. 6 of 7 council members are present this evening, and we have quorum. We will now move on to ordinances for third reading.
You want to give them a second to clear the room
Ordinance.
if they want to go?
Sure.
Then we may lose some people here.
Ordinance 120-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract extension to provide financial support for the operation of the Athens County Economic Development Council and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Okay, you have to bear with me. The computer went to sleep. I'm gonna wake it up again. Okay, I think we're back on. Thank you, Mr. President. You've read the title. This is a short ordinance. I'll read the pertinent section since this is the third reading, and I will make a motion that we adopt 120-24.
Second.
And I will read the pertinent section. The mayor is hereby authorized to enter into a contract extension through December 31st, 2027, to provide financial support for the operation of the Athens County Economic Development Council, ACEDC, in the amount of $60,000 annually from the general fund. A copy of said agreement and ACEDC deliverables is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Reisner. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Council members, city administration, public. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 121-24 is an ordinance authorizing 2025 staffing levels, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith, and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 121-24.
Second.
And the title says it all. I have nothing more to add to that.
Thank you, Member Reisner. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 122-24 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the Employee Benefit Service Center to serve as the city's third-party health insurance administrator, TPA, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 122-24.
Second.
Yeah, as with this last one, the title pretty much sums everything up. I'll read a little bit of Section 1 just to refresh everyone's memory. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a contract with Employees Benefit Service Center to serve as a third-party administrator, TPA, of the city's health insurance program for the period from January 1, 2025 to December 31st, 2025, to include Exhibit A, plan listing, administrative service, fee schedule, and amendment to the plain document attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And then said contract shall contain at a minimum various conditions and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Reisner. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Council, administration, audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 123-24 is an ordinance authorizing a group excess loss medical insurance contract, declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion that we adopt 123-24.
Second.
Section 1 reads, effective January 1, 2025, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a one-year contract ending December 31st, 2025 with Sirius America to cover the city's stop-loss excess loss medical insurance. A copy of the application policy schedule for group excess loss medical insurance is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference.
Thank you, Member Reisner. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions from council members? City administration? Public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 124-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a one-year agreement with Sunday Creek Horizons, a consulting firm, introduced by Councilmember Swain.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the council pass O 124-24.
Second.
This is simply a renewal of a contract with Sunday Creek Horizons, but the question is always asked, what is the money going for? So I'll simply read Section 1 because it hits on a couple very important points. The mayor is hereby authorized to enter into a one-year agreement with Sunday Creek Horizons, a consulting firm that will undertake the services as set forth in Exhibit 1, scope of services, to include management and administration of city grant-funded projects, completion of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which we referenced earlier, the transition plan, and work in collaboration with the city on identified projects. A copy of said agreement and scope of services are attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference.
Thank you, Member Swank. We have a motion and a second. Are there comments or questions, Member McCary?
Thank you, President Crowell and Member Swank. With the mayor being in attendance and still some members of the Commission on Disabilities, I thought this might be a great opportunity to first commend the administration for taking advantage of this opportunity to have these consultants help get this plan done. And then just to ask for any comment on thoughts on how the Commission on Disabilities might continue to be helpful to this collaboration in getting the plan written.
Oh, I think that they're critical to having this move forward, quite honestly. And so for them to engage with Sunday Creek Horizons during this planning process of putting together the transition plan, quite honestly, I don't think we could get it done without the input coming from the Commission on Disabilities.
Thank you. And then just as an additional piece of clarification, we may be passing this very shortly. Would you imagine that collaboration between Sunday Creek Horizons and the Commission on Disabilities would start in January or February of 2025, or would the other work that the Sunday Creek Horizons is doing maybe start the year and this would begin later?
What I can do for your council is update, or when I speak with the Commission on Disabilities, which I am now attending every chance I can get, just representing the mayor there at those meetings, and find out with them, what their ability is to start working closely with Sunday Creek Horizons now in January. I'd like to get it started as soon as possible.
Thanks very much.
Any other council members? Other city administration officials? Public? Seeing none, we have a motion.
Nope,
Yes.
one.
Oh,
Yep,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, Davey, please come forward.
Obviously, this is Davey McNally, 10202 Alderman Road, Millfield, Ohio. Again, just something we're really excited to get done. I am kind of curious what kind of expertise Sunday Creek has, or Sunday Horizons, but we're really looking forward to working with them as soon as we can and getting a plan done.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 125-24 is an ordinance authorizing disposal of vehicles no longer needed for a municipal purpose, introduced by Councilmember Spielness.
Yes, thank you, President Crowell. It's nice to have President Crowell at the helm here. Anyway, I just want to mention this very quickly. This is Athens City Council. Read this section 1. Athens City Council hereby declares the following no longer needed for municipal purpose. There are 2 vehicles with over 300 and well over 200,000 miles on them that we need to let go of. So by approving this, you will, the above listed vehicles will be reached its useful life and sold for scrap as hereby authorized for disposal. So I move that we pass this ordinance 125-24.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions on this ordinance from council? Administration? Members of the public? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 126-24 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 5, Public Utilities, Chapter 5.03, Water Regulations, Section 5.03.03, Wasted Water Charged For, and Title 1, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established. Introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. I would like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 126-24.
Second.
Thank you, Member Clodfelder. Section 1 reads Athens City Code Title 5 Public Utilities, Chapter 5.03 Water Regulations, Section 5.03.03, Wasted Water Charged For, is hereby amended to read as follows. 5.03.03 Wasted Water Charged For unless registered in the Residential Water Loss Protection Program. All water that passes through a meter shall be charged for whether used, wasted, or lost, and the Mayor or Safety Service Director may grant relief to the requirement when a water line breaks down breaks between the meter and the serviced building. With a verifiable break, the water and sewer charges shall be assessed for that month based upon the average monthly usage of the previous 6 months. Residential addresses with a 5/8 inch or 1 inch line may sign up for the Residential Water Loss Protection Program. The cost of the protection program is established by separate ordinance. A maximum credit of $750 may be applied to registered accounts for one verified break or leak once per calendar year. Additional terms and conditions for the program shall be set by the Service Safety Director and administered through the Utilities Billing Office. Just to highlight a piece of information from Section 2, $36 will be the annual opt-in fee added to a water customer's account, renewable annually. So just to summarize, this is an opportunity for citizens to think preventatively about the possibility of a water line break that can cost in some expensive water lost. And if you'd like to potentially be in a position to be reimbursed for that, this is a great program. And I'd like to consider or encourage council to support this.
Thank you, Member McCary. I believe we have a motion and a second for the passage of this ordinance. Are there any comments or questions from City Council, City Administration, and the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 127-24 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract to lease or otherwise monetize the city's solar renewable energy credits, SRECs. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 127-24.
Second.
As I explained in my brilliant PowerPoint presentation.
Can we say that again?
I said it was brilliant, and I'll stand by that statement. Anyway, since we all know what SRECs are, and it is a chance to recoup some funds by selling these credits to somebody out there who needs them, I believe we should adopt this.
Second.
Here we have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for second reading. I will read the title and check to see if there are any comments or questions. Ordinance 112-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to provide financial support from the city's transient guest tax for the operation of the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, ORCA, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Ordinance 128-24 is an ordinance to provide for an increase in the general city income tax of 0.30%, 0.30%, per annum beginning January 1, 2026, authorizing the question of the increase to be placed on the ballot at the next primary election to be held on May 6, 2025, introduced by the Finance and Personnel. Yes, Member McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. I just want to respond to public commentary on the reality that this can present a hardship financially for individuals. And I do want to reiterate what is said in the title is exactly what council is considering. It is not initiating the increase, but authorizing the measure to be on the ballot so that citizens can have the opportunity to understand what these the need is for additional income tax revenue and whether or not they want to support that.
Thank you, Member McCary. Ordinance 129-24 is an ordinance authorizing the auditor to reduce 2024 year-end appropriations, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Nope.
Ordinance 130-24 is an ordinance authorizing a water line replacement on Factory Street, introduced by Councilmember McCary. Ordinance 131-24 is an ordinance declaring a real and present emergency, thus obviating the formal bidding procedure. Proceed with the replacement of the ADA ramps at all four corners of the Court and Union Street intersection, as well as replacement of the crosswalks, introduced by Councilmember Spielman.
Thank you, President Crowell. So this has gotten a little bit complicated, and I just got some final information today about the status of this. I know that there was a lot of discussion about whether we should have real bricks or whether we could use the stamped concrete, and there's some strong positions on either side. Well, apparently we have gotten to a situation where the bid to do that extra work is not going to happen. So it became too expensive and could not do it in the time frame that was anticipated, and because of a variety of situations, the weather, etc. And so the actual amount will be less. I see our mayor wanting to say something, so I'm going to,
If you would like me to.
yes, why don't you? You look so eager, I figure I might as well let you
Just
talk.
because
Yeah.
I know this stuff forwards and backwards. You're correct in that the cost did go up significantly to do concrete, stamped concrete, for the crossing lanes themselves, the pedestrian crossing lanes, both the diagonals as well as the parallel, north, south, east, west. Because we would have to use, or the contractor would have to use glycol blankets to make sure that the surface doesn't freeze on top, which makes for a poor quality concrete surface. Knowing the importance, though, of getting this done and having seen it myself, and hopefully I would encourage council to go up at any point in time and look at the ADA ramps going down to the crossings. We do feel strongly that the ramps themselves need to be replaced now. And so therefore, it is estimated that it'll be, give or take, a, yet to be negotiated, but a $60,000 to $80,000 project. We're requesting a change to the 200 or whatever council currently has in that ordinance, to change it to $100,000, giving us the room to be able to work on getting the 4 corner ADA ramps done to where the transition is smooth to the bricks, with the plan that next year we will look at possibly putting in brick pavers to make for a smoother travel surface across there. We have manhole covers that we have to address as well that are right in the middle of those crosswalks. But I would also encourage council to take a look at the brick pavers that were put in on on Park Drive in front of Baker Center. They've been there since 2006, and you can see in several locations that those brick pavers are already beginning to fail. They're spalding because they aren't built like our beloved Athens block bricks were. The Athens block bricks, to try and pull up the bricks and relay them on some kind of a concrete underlay, given the shape and the contour of those bricks, they still will pose challenges for ADA accessibility across there. But we're willing to look at both stamped concrete and continue to look to see if there are brick products that can withstand the test of time. But I contend that we absolutely have to move forward with getting the ADA ramps done to where the transition to the brick, which may require pushing them further out into the street itself to make this work, that it be done. And we're hopeful that M&M Construction can move forward and get the 4 corner curb cuts done in the same amount of time that we were hoping that they would do, for a cost that we weren't anticipating for the full stamped concrete surfaces.
And I'd like to add that Andy Stone said in his communication that he would have city workers do some grinding down of that transition. Oh. Okay, that's what I read, yes.
Well, more importantly, to relay the bricks up to this new the ramp apron to where that they are,
Yes.
as smooth as we can make it.
However they do it, just smooth. Yes, okay. And I was hoping maybe they could grind a little bit of the actual crosswalk areas too, but I don't know if that's possible. But that's going to be, it looks like that's going to be done if council approves.
Member Spielness, do you have amendments to propose for this ordinance?
Well, I mean,
Changing
Debbie,
the
did
amount,
you
right?
understand? I mean, he wanted to change the amount. This came up late, so
Right.
I'm a little
We can
confused.
help if
Okay.
you'd like, or
We
Member
are-
Swank, you have?
Yes.
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to add. In addition to the cost going from 168,000 to 225,000, which is about 30 or 40%, the only way the contractor, according to Director Stone, the only way the contractor could even come close to getting it done in that 4-week period was to totally close the intersection. And that couldn't happen. That just could not happen. So that was one other
Yeah.
part of the which is a very, very important part. But yeah, 168 to 225 and might not happen.
So is there a council member who has the ordinance open in front of them that would like to recommend the necessary amendments to this ordinance to fit the new information we have from Service Agent Stone and the city administration?
Might I just say that you would be hopefully amending the amount to go
Right.
from what is in there currently to 100,000.
We also discussed that we should probably remove
The stay-up concrete.
crosswalk
Yeah.
That's right.
information and the
Correct.
concrete information. So there's a number of amendments that need to happen here.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
somebody
Yeah, I
that
can
would
do
I
like
could
that.
take a
to-
stab at it.
Go ahead.
Due to the need for immediate action to proceed with the replacement of the ADA ramps at all four corners of the Court and Union Street intersection, the City of Athens hereby declares an emergency situation pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 735-051. The 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $100,000 to Street Fund 220 Transaction Code 500 and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a contract with M&M Construction and to expend up to $100,000 from Street Fund 200 Transaction Code 500 for said replacement of ADA ramps and crosswalks.
No, just and ramps.
Oh, and ramps, excuse me. This ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the city of Athens, Ohio, in that it is necessary to provide ADA accessible streets and sidewalks within our community, and that it shall be in full force and effect upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend 131-24. Are there any comments or questions on these amendments? City administration, anything to add? Public? All those in favor
It looks
of,
like is there a question from the public?
please, come forward.
Thank you. Davey McNally, Chairperson of the Athens City Commission on Disabilities, representing that, 10202 Alderman Road. Yeah, obviously this is kind of a late development and, again, this is the most used crosswalk and curb cuts in the city of Athens. It is nowhere near ADA compliant. It's dangerous. What's dangerous right now, since the last time I was at city council, those curb cuts were ground down. They're still not perfect, but they are better. So I'm not getting stuck on them in traffic anymore. I know other people who use wheelchairs, especially manual wheelchairs. The main problem right now is the bricks. They're old, they're missing, they're slanted, it's dangerous. So yeah, just really deeply disappointed that this can't happen. I mean, yeah, and just to go back, what I was going to say is just talk about how we had met and worked for years with the Historic Preservation Commission on, coming to the agreement that stamped concrete is fine. But really, concrete is the gold standard. Pavers shift, they wobble, they end up not being ADA compliant. Bricks over an underlay of concrete, again, same issues. There's numerous places in the city where people have taken bricks out of the crosswalks. It's really a sorry state of I want people with disabilities to be able to use Uptown Athens, to be able to come to places like City Council, to government buildings for voting. And right now, people with disabilities are cut out from these establishments and these services. And again, it's just another sad day to not get this done as soon as possible. So I think we probably have another comment or two.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Stephanie Hunter from 204 Elmwood Place. This time I am speaking as a member of the Accessibility and Advocacy Committee. So I listened to Mr. Traxler's presentation when he came to us to tell us about how he would prefer bricks to concrete. And I'm actually really glad he came and talked about it, because actually his speech really convinced me that we really need the concrete and not the brick pavers. So he began his presentation by talking a lot about the maintenance that bricks require, and how he's been personally witness to 50 years of maintenance problems, and that's not an administration problem, that's a small cities and money problem, and it is just expensive to continue to maintain a brick crosswalk. And so another thing is he had this nice packet of papers, which I was able to page through while he was talking, and he had a nice stack of photographs of different crosswalks that were made of brick, except, as you might know, I am a graduate student in the City and Regional Planning Program up in OSU, and so as I got looking closely at these photos, I actually realized a lot of them were stamped concrete, like 3 or 4 of them, of his examples of really good, pretty crosswalks were stamped concrete, and so, if they can fool Brick's #1 fan, I figured that's pretty good. And the other thing he urged us to do is to go look in person. So I did. And I go up to OSU a couple times a week, and there are lots of brick crosswalks across the short north up there. And so I went and took a look at them. Yeah, they're very pretty. You can see them. They are crumbling. Short north gets huge amounts of traffic akin to what we get on Court Street. And these are 5-10-year-old crosswalks, and the bricks themselves, they're not going out of place. They're just crumbling. So that really brings into question whether around here we can get the sort of quality of pavers that we need for high traffic intersections. Because even down in front of Baker, that's not a high traffic place, and they are already going, probably just from the freeze thaw system we have. So I really admire Mr. Traxler's perseverance on what he believes, but ultimately, to me, the beauty of the city is in functioning for everyone who lives in it. And so I really urge the city to go with the concrete in the future and not go back to modern brick pavers, because we know that concrete is safe, it's durable, it's accessible, it's within the budget, and it looks good enough to fool people who really don't like it. So let's just do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Any other comments from the public? Please, yes.
Hi, Brittany, representing my place, and also the disability people that have disabilities. Like, I live in Court Street. I get that they need more stuff done, but it's the bricks, I've seen it fall in half and break and everything, and it's hard to get my wheelchair even down the road without hurting my fingers and other things, especially when it's raining. It's horrible to get wet down there. You can just, and people don't watch where they go sometimes, and they do, and then they about hit some people, so I'm like, something needs to be done across the street for me, or put a thing from where my friend brought to my attention at where I live. I think you know him. He did the train system. He said by where Central Avenue, that little other part next to the sign where door is, that was not supposed to be there. That was supposed to be something else, and it didn't get fixed. So I don't know if there could be a crosswalk there, but people from my house, the board, as he would, and it's the people walking and students and everybody else down there, it's not, I recommend it's not good in a wheelchair rather than a walker. The bricks are not great. Especially by where I live, I have to go down the alley there's so many roads that have so many potholes, but they're filled. Bumps, you have to like, it almost threw me out one day. Like it was a crack in it over by Bus Union, by by the skull. Like there's a little thing, I don't know what it is, it's like crossing the Union Street down like on the sidewalk. It's not, I've almost fell out of it, like going face forward down that hill. Wow. And people don't watch as they go. Sometimes they do, sometimes they get, it's drunk people, it's not an option. And the lights, you only get, as I went on State Street, like the light cross where I used to live on Eden, the one part was not showing, and like, people don't watch as they go. They're on their phones, or either calling people. I'm like, I've almost got hit twice, not in a wheelchair, like close to that. It's not okay, and something needs to be done about the roads. I've almost fell 5 times out of that turn. No offense to my friends, the wheel's broken, and other things. I mean, something's got to give. And me rolling it, even the planes, like some of the sidewalks horrible. They got to be done. Like something's got to be done. Potholes and Burn Street and some of that. It's okay, but it's bad. And I like concrete more than bricks. I think concrete should be in there, but until level it's gonna happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second for.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry.
For the amendments.
Yeah.
Member Swank seconded, Member Claude Felters.
Okay, great. I'm sorry I didn't get that.
All those in favor of the proposed amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move that we suspend the rules to pass 131-24.
Second.
Reason behind that is we have one more meeting, and we have 6 here tonight, and there's no guarantee we'll have 6 next week. And if we don't, we can't get it passed in time to do this work over the 4-week break.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Are there any comments or questions on this motion? Administration? All those in favor of suspending the rules for 131-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended, Member Swank.
Mr. President, I would move that council pass 131-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 131-24. Are there any comments or questions from City Council members? City Administration? Council members? Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 132-24 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.07, Administrative Departments, Boards and Commissions, Section 3.07.01, City Planning Commission, introduced by Councilmember Swank. Ordinance 133-24 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 23, Zoning Code, Chapter 23.07, Board of Zoning Appeals, Section 23.07.01, Appointment, introduced by Councilmember Swank. Ordinance 134-24 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 33, Shade Tree Commission, Section 33.01.01A2, Commission Membership, introduced by Councilmember Swank. Ordinance 135-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 24032, concerning wages and working conditions, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Okay, we are now moving on to a resolution for second reading. This is Resolution 10-24, a resolution to place the issue of increasing the city income tax by 0.30% per annum beginning January 1st, 2026, on the ballot at the next primary election on May 6th, 2025, and directing the Board of Elections of Athens County to conduct the election, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Read for the second time. Okay, moving on, We now have announcements and other business. Are there any motions concerning the items that are on the table?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to remove from the table 115-24.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second to remove from the table 115-24. Are there any comments or questions on this motion? Administration, public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Member Reisner, 115-24 is removed from the table.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to adopt 115-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt 115-24. Are there any comments or questions on this ordinance?
I think it's been thrashed out pretty well.
Anyone else? City administration? Members of the public?
I do have a question.
Member Swain.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, Mr. President.
Member Swain.
In looking at all the documentation that's been provided to us, and there's been a bunch of it, a lot of numbers. The one thing that keeps sticking in my mind is the percentage increase from last year. From 2000 to 2023 to 2024, and I'm talking about the general fund, went up approximately 13%. And from 2024 to 2025, the proposed budget has gone up 8%. Those two percentages seem, can't do anything about this year, but combined, that's pretty large. And in looking through those documents, some things popped up that I'd like some clarity on before voting on this. Couple fall under the auditor's thing. There's a tremendous increase in, and there's probably a good explanation for this, but all we saw were numbers. There were two things that went up considerably from 2024 to 25. One was the annual audit, went up $30,000. And the other was postage, that went up a whole bunch. And I'm just curious as to why the increase on those two things. Mm-hmm.
General.
No, in your budget.
I don't know offhand.
I mean, it went up a bunch, like, and I grabbed the wrong packet, but it went up like $12,000. And the annual audit went up $30,000.
I can't tell you offhand.
Okay. Now,
I wish you had contacted me earlier today. I could have.
Yeah, well, I say if I had the material with me and I yeah, grabbed the wrong stack of things today. The other thing, and I addressed this to the mayor, in the mayor's budget, travel went up $18,000. And I'm just curious what that's for.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that I have the opportunity to share some interesting news with all of City Council, and that is that, unfortunately, the individual who was elected as the president of the National League of Cities lost her runoff. Mayor Sharon Weston Broom of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And therefore, since I was elected as the first vice president for the National League of Cities, I ascend to the presidency, representing 19,500 cities, towns, and villages across the nation. Along with that role comes an extensive amount of travel, representing the city of Athens on the national stage, but also fulfilling my responsibilities with the National League of Cities. When I do travel to NLC events, and this is worth mentioning to everybody, because of my role, the National League of Cities reimburses the city for my travel. That reimbursement does not go back into my fund line for travel. It goes into the general fund. So therefore, it's not like it's replenishing itself. I ran into some issues this past year in my role as the second vice president, to where we had to come to council to increase my travel budget for that very same reason. Because when I'm traveling and the National League of Cities reimburses the city of Athens for that travel, it goes right back into the general fund, as the auditor can attest to. It doesn't go back into the mayor's travel budget. So therefore, we padded it this year with the thought in mind that my travel would increase anyway as the first vice president. But now I'm the president of the National League, which comes with it an immense amount of responsibility, not only for the city of Athens, but for the National League of Cities.
So in terms of the total budget for the city, it's a net zero. There's no cost.
For my NLC travel.
Right.
Now I still have travel that I.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, just as an example. I travel to attend the conferences for the International Town Gown Association, of which I am the now past president of that organization, but a lot of other organizations where travel is important. There's a lot of things where I don't get reimbursed, which is worth mentioning to everyone here tonight. All of my travel that I do, which I qualify for claiming mileage to, when I go to the Buckeye Hills Regional Council meetings, I don't do that. I either take the city vehicle or I drive myself and just bite it. It's that important and not worth nickel and diming the city over that level of travel. Nor do I, and again, the auditor recognizes this, it's just my practice. I don't claim per diem. I don't submit receipts for meals when I go places. I don't want to sit there and have to worry about, I have to itemize things. This is for food, and this might be for an adult beverage. And so therefore, I don't do that. Again, that's my own personal way. My wife is not happy with it, but oh well, it's part of what I do when I am trying to be fiscally responsible, not only to the city, but I'm going to present and MC basically the Power Clean Futures Ohio Energy Champions meeting Wednesday evening. That's up in Columbus at COSI. I'm not going to claim mileage. I'm just going to go and do what I need to do and then come back down to Athens again. But I appreciate the question because it gives me a chance to speak on things that the public doesn't know. And I think that this is important in full transparency, that a lot of the work that I am doing is elevating the recognition of Athens, Ohio on the national and international stage.
Yeah, likewise, that's why it was so important that we got all that detailed information, that we could take a look at that, because even though we're not voting on individual items and all that, all those items do add up to the $53 million budget that we're going to be voting on here in a few minutes. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Congratulations. So didn't win the runoff in the municipal election.
It was really unfortunate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Swank. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Member Thomas.
I was just asking, for Member Swank, are you talking about the jumps in like the audit from 70,000 to 100,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Those, I saw those and I asked Leanna in the auditor's office, and she explained that every 3 years they reassess those numbers. That's the kind of what I call the roommate breakdown of shared expenses for the city. And she said every 3 years they assess those, and that's why it jumped up.
Yeah, I'd seen it was about the same 4 years ago, so I just wondered if it was on a cycle.
Yeah.
It's the same with the postage too, Member Swank. It was 19,000 in 2021. Then it had a couple of years of lower, and then it's up to
Okay.
that cycle. It doesn't.
Okay. Well, good.
Member McCary.
Thank you. This is just a quick follow-up for the mayor. I know since I've joined council in 2021 that we've benefited from our relationship with the National League of Cities, and with your increased involvement in the number of opportunities that affords the city to learn, are there any particular initiatives that you're hoping that through your increased engagement with the NLC, Athens will benefit from?
Does it have to be specific to NLC? Or can it be specific to Strong Cities?
Yeah, that since they have a partnership, I think that's...
Well, we might see the NLC in town too, right?
We would, because that is one of the, that's not a requirement, but there is a level of expectation that when the president, in the presidential year for the National League of Cities, when we have what's called the Summer Boards and Leadership Meeting, that meeting is in the community from which the mayor comes from.
The president, in this case.
And that's potentially 300 visitors from across the nation who are coming into our community and experiencing our community. So I appreciate the question. Since my pathway has accelerated substantially, I've basically lost a year of planning in that. I will be running as fast as I possibly can to figure out how we do this, whether it is a full conference here in the city of Athens or whether it is a truncated trip. I'm getting into the weeds, and I don't want to do that. But that would certainly benefit, the whole community would benefit from that, because you'd have 300 people who now see Athens and get to understand how amazing the city is. Because I'm talking about it on the national stage all the time. Now they'd actually get to come and see it. I do want to mention one thing real quick, and this is good for council, because I want council to be aware of this. Because I was talking with Superintendent Tom Gibbs. Again, this is a benefit of my involvement with the Strong Cities Network, as everyone should recognize that Councilmember McCary is also involved in that, as is the whole city. And that is that one of the things I learned in Cape Town, South Africa at the conference, the Global Summit, was the idea of having high school student ambassadors that city councils, this is another community, global community, this is a city in England that has been doing this, to where the council members each get to select or at least identify a high school student to basically be part of a student leadership council, basically. I've spoken to just before I came in here, spoke with Superintendent Tom Gibbs and asked if Tom Gibbs would be interested in this, something like this, and he said absolutely, to the point that he would do the vetting process if council were to be interested in something like this, to where we are demonstrating civility in how governments should function locally. I believe that we function very well as a government. I can't say that for all communities out there, but so that was a takeaway from that conference that I want to deploy here in the city of Athens, to where even myself would identify a high school student or two who is interested in doing this kind of work, to understand the true functions of the city and the way in which we engage with each other. I would offer that to the treasurer's office. I would offer that to the auditor's office and the law director's office, to see if we can have something to where individuals are interested in those functions, but also collectively coming together and having something possibly monthly, or at least, well, quarterly isn't going to work, monthly with the students when the student body is in session at the high school. And maybe even looking at middle school students, starting younger and understanding the perils that communities are falling into when it comes to hate, extremism, and polarization.
Thanks very much for those examples.
Thank you, Mayor. Member Spelman?
Yeah, I went through the budget and the revenue, and I really appreciate the information that you all gave us, and the form it was given in. That was super helpful, and I think that should be done every year. But my concern is, I don't want to nickel and dime or get in the weeds with you guys about what you're spending. However, I am concerned, this was brought up before, that right now, given all the uncertainties of a lot of the different things, saying that we want to pass this budget and then we need to put that on the ballot to raise taxes without a specific item like the fire station to request the money for, I think could be very difficult to do. So I just question the wisdom of not taking another look at how we can cut something from the budget rather than raising the taxes to the extent that we're talking about. So that's where I'm really struggling with all this. I mean, basic, I understand that you need to go through and pay people, and I'm happy to give them the raise and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just concerned about that process and where that might lead. So I'd like to have that discussion, perhaps.
We have a motion on the floor.
Thank you. We do have a motion on the floor.
Could I say something? I think we're confusing a couple of things here. The budget that we're trying to pass so that we can pay our employees next year has nothing to do with putting something on the ballot. They're separate issues. Don't confuse the two. So I'm going to suggest that we end debate here. Otherwise, I'm going to call the question. And I think I have the votes to carry it.
Member Swank, you want to add, give another comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. I would vehemently disagree. I think the mayor just talked about civility. Perhaps you can demonstrate some of that.
Oh, don't talk
I think
down
call
to
to
me. I'm
question
too old
says
for
no
that.
debate, according to council rules.
Was there a official call to question, or did he say he was going to? I
Yeah, he
didn't
didn't
hear
say
an
he didn't.
official call to question.
So
I'll do it.
my point is, I have the floor, please. I've been recognized by
Member
the
Swank, please finish. Thank you.
They are very much related. In fact, there are three things related here. We're looking at an 8% increase in our budget. And the rate of inflation right now is 2.5%. We have a carryover very similar to the carryover we've had every year since 2020. We're going to ask the public to possibly raise their taxes, their base taxes, by 18.75%. And the city right now is out $722,000. If you talk to anybody in this town other than your own peer group, there are some real concerns. And because of those concerns, I'm afraid if we put this thing on the ballot with an 8% budget increase and the missing money, that levy may fail because it's not a levy for a tangible item. A school is a tangible item. A firehouse is a tangible item. A city pool is a tangible item. An income tax is not. And from my experience working with schools all across this state, you don't want to get into a pattern of failing a levy. Because once a levy fails and people see that nothing really changes, it's very difficult to pass it the next time it's around. The way schools get away with it is they threaten to do away with sports. And when that threat is made, levies pass. So that's my concern. And I think Member Spilness brings up a very, very good point. All of this taken together, and unfortunately, loss of money is very, very unfortunate, but it happened. The public is wondering what's going on. I could easily vote for a budget today that was 4 or 5%. 8%, I guess I'll find out when we vote. But they are interrelated.
Thank you, Member Swank. Member Thomas?
Well, to clarify, they're not related. This is a 25 budget starting in 2 weeks. What we might put on the ballot and the voters would choose is for the following year, wouldn't begin until 26. They're not for the same year. There's ample time to discuss it in the future. Some of your points may be very valid, but also the breakdown of income tax, 1.6 is general revenue of our income tax. And we did this 8 years ago, 2016. So we have done it before, and it has been done in the past. It's up for debate, it's up for discussion, but the budget passing pays our bills that are coming no matter what. Or we can go through what Director Stone sent forward. We can do a 2-week furlough and begin a furlough and not pay people at all for the beginning of the year. I don't want to do that. I'm not willing to vote for that, but that's your name.
Any other comments or questions from Council Member Spelman?
Yes, and you did bring it up. The section 5705.38, annual appropriation measures, classification, section A. On or about the first day of each fiscal year, the taxing authority of each subdivision or other tax unit shall pass an appropriation measure, and therefore, thereafter, during the year, it may pass any supplemental appropriation measures it finds necessary based on the revised tax budget, blah, blah, blah. If it desires to postpone the passage of the annual appropriation measure until an amended certificate is received based on actual balances, it may pass a temporary appropriation measure for meeting the ordinary expenses of the taxing unit. So the bottom line is Columbus does it, Cincinnati does it, other cities do it. We could pass a temporary if we so choose. And therefore, we'd have a little bit more chance to think it through. Now, I would propose, I know there's one in the measure on the table, but that we could do a basic one that essentially authorized the city to continue paying all the basic expenses and pay all salaries, et cetera. But the final thing could be done in February or even up till April, by the way. So I'm just saying the option is there to do that. I know that's not going to be popular, but it would maybe give us a chance to see some of the things that are still sort of up in the air at this point. And so I'm a little uncomfortable.
Members Spianis, any other comments or questions from city council members? We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 115-24. The administration, anything to add? Members of the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
How many was that?
Law Director, would you like a show of hands, or?
Yes, I would.
We will go
Favor.
and do this again. In favor, please raise your hand. 4. Opposed, raise your hand.
Thank you.
2. 4 to 2, the ordinance has been approved. Member Reisner, would you like to continue on taking things off the table?
Yes, I would. I'd like to remove from the table ordinance 116-24, an ordinance authorizing 2025 non-union compensation, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith, and declaring an emergency. There.
So moved, or second?
We have a motion and a second to remove 116-24 off the table. Are there any comments or questions on this motion? The administration, members of the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance has been removed from the table. Member Reisner.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 116-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 116-24. Are there any comments or questions from City Council? City Administration? Members of the public? All those in favor of adopting 116-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has been adopted, or excuse me, the ordinance has been adopted.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion we remove from the table 117-24. An
Second.
ordinance,
Sorry.
go ahead, second. An ordinance adopting a fringe benefit package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith and declaring an emergency.
Member Reisner, we have a motion and a second to remove from the table 117-24. Are there any comments or questions from council on this motion? City Administration, members of the public? All those in favor of removing from the table 117-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion has been removed from the table. Member Reisner.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 117-24.
Second?
A motion and a second to adopt 117-24. Are there any comments or questions on this ordinance? City Administration, members of the public? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting 117-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion has been, the ordinance has been approved. What time is it? 10:28? Oh, my goodness. All right, ordinance, Member Reisner.
Well, we'll set a record here tonight. I'd like to make a motion to remove from the table 118-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove from the table 118-24. Are there any comments or questions on this motion? City Administration, members of the public? Seeing none, all those in favor of removing from the table 118-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion, the ordinance has been removed from the table. Member Reisner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to adopt 118-24, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into or to extend the agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office through December 31st, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 118-24. Are there any comments or questions on this ordinance from council members?
Just kidding.
City Administration, members of the public? All those in favor of adopting 118-24 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. That is the last item. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 10:29 PM.